A little bit of a false start today, wasn't it? Hey guys, what's up? Happy Friday. It is happy hour. We made it. How is everyone doing today? I'm doing just great. I've had a little bit of a crazy week, but it's a good week. I feel really good. I cannot believe it's Friday. Just as a heads up, I will so maybe it's a heads up, maybe it's a little bit of bragging. Maybe it's I want you all to be a little bit jealous. I at 6 p.m. today I'm going to be going to see V for Vendetta on the big screen with a whole bunch of rowdy libertarians in New Hampshire. So I'm really hoping we can wrap this up in maybe 2.5 hours or so. And this can't be a 3-hour stream or something because I got someplace to be. So we're gonna jump right into it. Kurt said, "Dude, it is raining so bad outside right now. It is so bad, but it is a great day to go to the movies and watch V for Vendetta later, which is what I will be doing. And I'm really excited about that. But before we get into the good movie, we've got to watch the horror. And that is what happy hour is all about. It is about watching the horror that is happening right in front of us right now. Nat D dropped by earlier to say Kimberly Crenshaw is not bad looking. Well, don't let that fool you. Don't let that fool you. Because she may look okay. She does. I'm not going to lie. She looks fine. I'm not going to say anything bad. But the horror that she is unleashing on all of us is unmeasured. So if this is your first happy hour, what you need to know is that happy hour is a time for us on Fridays to come together, to blow off steam after a long week. And what we do is we watch a woke training or a presentation of some sort, and I talk about what I think it means. And we learn how to decipher the woke. We learn what they're actually saying, because oftentimes what's reported in the media is different than what they're actually saying. The media tends to go for the most outlandish headlines that they can. And it's not that we don't need to know that information. We do need to know that information. But I actually find what the woke are doing to be so much more insidious than what is reported in the media. And so this is like an advanced crash course in what's really going on that you aren't going to hear about, not even in conservative media that talks about critical race theory and screams about critical race theory. This is you're going to see what they're actually saying, and you're going to be able to decide for yourself what you think about it. So today we are going to be watching, hang on, let me bring it up on the screen. Hang on, share screen. Today we are going to be watching a presentation that was streamed on August 31st, 2021, called What is Critical Race Theory and Why is it Under Attack? Watch Kimberly Crenshaw together with Devin Carbato in a fascinating conversation with Laura Flanders, filmed live at Union Chapel in Martha's Vineyard on August 24th, 2021. In recent months, lawmakers in over 24 states have attempted to censor teachers from discussing racism, sexism, issues of equality and justice. These continuing attempts to gag anti-racist education and training have proliferated over the last few months, and there is an urgent need to marshal immediate action to halt the rampant spread of disinformation campaign to seeking to dismantle racial justice efforts. This conversation charts the history, development, and continued salience of critical race theory and why its transformative potential makes it such a target for opponents of a truly multiracial democracy. So I think we can all surmise from this little description that those of us who oppose critical race theory will probably be called racist. Is this stream going through to YouTube? Okay, it is. It appears to be working. It looked disconnected on my end for a second. So I think we can surmise that we might be seeing a whole bunch of nonsense in this presentation. I think we can surmise that we will be probably called racist many times in this presentation, and that's okay. That's okay. Oh, Honey Badger said it just started on YouTube. Oh, bastards. Oh man. Sorry, YouTube, where the vast majority of my audience is. Welcome back. I don't know what the hell happened there. I was just doing an intro to the stream. So I'm sorry. We will start again. Today we are going to be watching a presentation called What is Critical Race Theory and Why it is Under Attack. This is going to be Kimberly Crenshaw in action. I'm not going to read the whole thing again. I don't want to bore, the 3 people that are watching it on other streams. I apologize for whatever hiccup just happened on YouTube. But you guys know the deal. Happy hour is a time when we watch woke training. It opened up with you on the description. Okay. It's finally back up, apparently. Like, refresh or something, maybe. I don't know what's going on. You didn't miss anything. We're good. Okay, couple housekeeping notes before we get started today. Oh, the YouTube was giving apparently like a really long ad. This better be monetized then, I swear to God. Couple housekeeping notes before we start today. Number 1, I do happy hours every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern time when I am available. But next week, I will not be available because next week I will be in London, England for a week of research and investigation into different types of experiences for a project that I hope to launch next year. So, because of that, I do want to give you guys a heads up that because I will be in England, I will not be doing happy hour next Friday. Now, I will be doing streams from England. I will be doing content. Don't worry, I'm not going to disappear for like a week, but I will be away. And so we won't be doing this live. And definitely make sure you get signed up for my locals if you want to know what I'm doing then. And if you are in the greater London area, I will be doing a meetup on November 21st. That's Sunday in the afternoon at a bar near the hotel I'm staying at. You guys are welcome to come down, have some food with me, have some drinks with me. Maybe it'll just be me hanging out by myself. Who really knows? But the information for that is in my locals, and I'm really excited about it. Speaking of my locals, you can help me keep 100% independent by coming and joining me in locals. You can join at kb.locals.com. You can join for free. But if you do want to support the work I'm doing, you can become a supporter in locals, which will unlock all of the features on the platform. You can do that at $5 a month or more. If you want to give more, you can do that at $50 for the year, which gives you 2 months for free, or you can make one-time gifts if you just want to do that as well. I greatly appreciate the support I get in my locals. You guys make it possible for me to do what I am doing, and I cannot thank you enough. So I really, really, really do appreciate it. 9 Inches, well, I'm not saying that full name. What are we drinking? I'll get to that in a second. I do have some drinks, but we're going to get to that in a second, okay? So the other thing I want you to know is that you can currently pre-order my book that will be out next year. It's called Actively Unwoke, the ultimate guide for fighting back against woke insanity in your life. I have pinned the link to pre-order that book at the top of the stream today in the chat on the YouTube channels. If you are not watching on YouTube, if you are watching on Rockfin or Odyssey or Facebook or maybe a mysterious platform that I don't even know I'm on, you can probably find that in the description, or you can just go to Amazon and look up Actively Unwoke. It'll be out in April. We're going to be talking about this book a lot. We're kind of in the quiet phase of the pre-order phase right now because I'm not really doing much to market it, but I will be next year. I've got a lot of stuff planned for this book. I'm really excited about it. It's got case studies for you. It decodes the woke for you. It tells you what to do if you get canceled. It's got all sorts of good stuff that I really wrote it for just normal people. This is not an intellectual book. Not at all. Not in any way. It is a book that is written for normal people to help them understand what is going on and how to fight back. The intellectuals are actually probably going to hate this book, to be really fun. I'm going to get Kathy Young is going to give me a very poor book review. That's for sure. I don't even care. But that's that. Lastly, before we jump into it, you're going to want to get your Unwoke Bingo card for today. The link to get the Unwoke Bingo card is going to be in the description of the video. Go ahead and generate your card because we do play Unwoke Bingo as we watch these presentations. You get a free space in the middle, and then we're going for a line or we're going for corners. If you get a bingo, please make sure you chat in bingo so we can all congratulate you and give you virtual high fives. Once we get a single bingo, we go for blackout bingo. No one has gotten a blackout bingo yet. Someday it's going to happen. I feel confident. People have gotten really, really close to blackout bingo. I think people have gotten a couple squares away. So I feel confident it's going to happen at some point. Maybe this could be what it is today. Who the heck knows? But make sure you grab your bingo cards. You don't win anything for getting a bingo. It's just to kind of keep us entertained and make sure we're paying attention to what is actually being said. All right. because I got to get out of here to go see V for Vendetta later. And I want to be done this expeditiously. Let's jump right into it and get started. Let me know in the chat if you are ready to go as I get this all set up. Chrome tab, share audio. All right, let's rock and roll. And of course, let me know if you can't hear the sound. Oh, wait. I don't have a drink yet. I have my priorities. I don't have a drink yet. Okay, hang on, stand by. I have 3 options for drinks today. I just went to the specialty beer store and got some stuff ready to go. Let me see. There we go. The first thing I have, you guys get to vote in the chat. I cannot believe I forgot the most important part of the stream. It's called Happy Hour, for crying out loud. It was soft, Adrian. Don't worry, we're gonna fix it. Okay, so the first thing I have is from Pipe Dream Brewing, and it's called Berrylicious Sour Ale. And I got it because I like the can and it was purple, and I like that the can has I used to have my tongue pierced. I got my tongue pierced like a week after my 18th birthday. And then eventually my dentist said, if you don't take that thing out of your tongue, you're going to knock your front teeth out. And I was like, okay, I don't want that. I mean, I committed to that. I had it for a long time. And then I was forced to take it out. Anyway, this is a berrylicious sour ale. This wild sour ale is rich with berry flavored, aged in 900 pounds of blackberries, blueberries. The berrylicious sour ale will leave your tongue black and blue, but wanting more. That's number 1 option. Number 2 option is, look at this can. This can also has a really nice texture on it. I just want to touch this can. It feels so good. And this is a raspberry hard cider. A raspberry hard cider is blended with American white oak and infused with natural raspberry extract to create a hint of berry flavor. And it's gluten-free. Raspberry cider. Or this is like the dessert right here. Check this out. It's called I'm a Mouse, duh. But this is a imperial stout with Oreos, pumpkin puree, pumpkin pie spice, caramel, brownie mix, chocolate, vanilla, and lactose. We're going to save that one for a minute. I think I'm going to start with the cider. Because I just love this isn't this can awesome? I love this pink so much. I used to hate the color pink. Okay, let's get our drinks. You can type in what you're drinking in the chat. Okay. Ooh, it's clear. Not fancy. It looks like a wine. It looks like I'm high class. There we go. Let's take a drink. It doesn't really taste like... No, it does taste like raspberry. I take that back. It definitely does taste like raspberry. Cody says, you get the raspberry hard cider now. Victor gets the I'm a Mouse from the... No, Victor is not getting the I'm a Mouse from the fridge later. Okay, got a couple super chats, and then I promise we're going to get started. I promise. I'm breaking my own rules here. I'm like, I gotta be somewhere, and I gotta get started on time, and I don't get started on time. Just before the stream, I walked through a homeless woman wearing a disposable mask. How deep does the brainwashing go for that? Well, to be fair to the homeless woman, George, homeless people tend not to be all there. That's why they are homeless most of the time. I don't say that to be mean. Like, live whatever life you want, but, you know, there was probably an extra level of insanity there. Anyway, George also says, I'm having a ginger tea. Excellent. All right. Let's get started. Here we go. Okay, take 2. Let me know about the volume. It was just starting to come in, so it's going to get loud in a sec.
Credit, and also, most importantly for our purposes tonight, she's really the perfect interlocutor for this subject. So thank you so much, Laura. Thank you to everyone for coming.
Is Kimberly Crenshaw man-spreading?
All right. Thank you.
I think she is. Is the volume okay? I can't even hear her now. She doesn't know how microphones work. I can't even hear her right now, to be honest. Hang on. I can't even
beat up anymore, but
Is
now
that better?
we have critical race theory. People may have kind of got calm about the COVID virus, but we can get them very excited about the virus of teaching, complaining.
Oh my God. Oh, we have to go back to the start of this woman's speech. You know it's going to be epic. You know, I'll turn down. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to turn down my volume a little bit to try to even it out. And then you guys can turn your volume up.
Political officials.
Okay. Give the woman a microphone.
But I'll try it again. I guess my point in asking you whether you have spent the day vigorously tabling for truth or berating your local school board officials is to point out that had we been in Texas just 1 month ago, and had we perhaps been of a slightly different political persuasion, that's in all likelihood exactly how we would have been spending our day. July in Texas and Fort Worth saw the school board besieged by people complaining about something called critical race theory, which they don't happen to teach anywhere near Fort Worth, Texas.
Oh, really?
The names of the people that spoke in the school board should have been familiar to at least those who were paying attention, because they're the same names showing up in petitions all across the state.
If they don't teach critical race theory, then why are you concerned? If you don't teach it, then why are you concerned?
State complaining about critical race theory being taught in Fort Worth schools. The names could have been familiar, so could have been the talking points that were raised in those complaints, because they were the very talking points that right-wing groups from the Heritage Foundation to ALEC to groups like Moms for the Republic have been teaching since last.
Did you hear the disdain in her voice when she said Moms for the Republic? These people have an absolute disdain for everyone that does not agree with them.
Winter's vacation. While they've been doing that, you have a whole lot of very happy Republicans sitting back and saying, as Steve Bannon did recently, critical race theory is the Tea Party to the 10th degree. You have a whole lot of people saying, we don't have Obama to beat up anymore, but now we have critical race theory.
Oh, they beat up Obama all the time, honey.
People may have kind of got calm about the COVID virus, but we can get them very excited about the virus of teaching about this nation's history. So tonight, we're going to maybe fill in a little gap. If we perhaps haven't been as busy training one another in how to defend truth and teaching and diversity and the shreds of progress that we've been making as a country, well, then we're going to try to put that right tonight with our very own PragerU in the form of Kimberly Crenshaw, Devin Carbado, and we have our own videos to watch. We have our own talking points to train you in. But most importantly, we are sounding an alarm. We're sounding an alarm about something that isn't just rhetorical, isn't just entertainment, isn't just something that's keeping, cable TV ratings high, or keeping people engaged in elections, or even just something that is fueling excitement about school board elections, which, let's face it, we used to get more excited about on the left side of the spectrum than we do today. But conservatives going back, well, I first heard it from Ralph Reed of the Christian Coalition, where he said he would rather have 1,000 school boards than one president and no school boards. And
well, okay,
Donald
hang
Trump's
on.
advisors.
This is actually a really fair point, and this is part of why we do these, because I want to see what they're saying. And what she just said is that they now understand that conservatives are going to be going after the school boards. That's what I just heard there. We're not as engaged with the school boards as we could be. That's what I just heard there. So let's just keep that in mind. Are more people interested in now? You guys know my position on this. I don't actually think that school boards make much of a difference. However, that doesn't mean we cede the ground. It doesn't mean we cede the ground at all. So just get ready for it. They're going to start fighting back on that one if they haven't already started in your community already. Make sure you know what the people in your community are doing.
Steve Bannon said just the other day, the road back to taking the White House runs through the school boards of this country.
Steve Bannon doesn't know what the fuck he's
But
talking
it's not
about.
just about what's happening
He
in
does,
K
just
through
not on
12,
this.
as you'll hear.
Sorry.
It's not just
sorry.
about what's happening to teachers. It's what your kids may or may not be taught. It's what your friends who are teachers or yourselves who work in education may or may not be able to teach. It's what may or may not be allowed in your corporations, in your businesses.
Again, I have to ask, if you're really not teaching critical race theory in the schools, then why is this a problem? It makes no sense. Nick H says, liar, liar, blue plants on fire. You know, she was like, you guys remember when the Hillary supporters were all like wearing their pantsuits? You know, that's left over from like the Hillary inspired me to wear a pantsuit thing.
When it comes to diversity and inclusion trainings, it's even about what you may or may not be allowed to screen on television or hear on radio.
No.
Or what grants you may be able to get from a local
Oh my
nonprofit.
God, projection. I should get a projection emoji. Projector emoji.
Attack on critical race theory is already very high. We have about 11 states that have already passed legislation and about 16 that are beginning to consider it in this legislative year. We have way more than that have considered legislation, and if we know something about the right, they don't give up. And those trainings from the Heritage Foundation, the American Legislative Exchange Council, producing legislation that's being mimicked all across the country, are continuing.
Okay, if Chris Rufo is mentioned in this presentation, everyone gets a free bingo square. Free bingo square if they mention Chris Rufo. By name.
So we better get started with ours. I'm going to introduce our guests right after we look at the video that the African American Policy Forum has prepared for educating people.
African American Policy Forum is Kimberly Crenshaw. That's Kimberly Crenshaw.
Let's play it. Now it can be told.
Last summer, the killings of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery catalyzed an unprecedented worldwide mobilization, activating tens of millions of Americans of all races to demand institutional accountability and reform. As these images spread across the world, the right scrambled for a way to snuff out this transformative energy. And they think they found it by orchestrating a repressive censorship campaign. In Arizona, Idaho, Texas, Georgia, we are seeing school boards attempting to rewrite curriculums, teachers getting fired for educating their students about racial disparities, and potentially an entire generation being fed lies about American history.
Wow.
Make no mistake. What we are seeing now is a calculated backlash to last year's summer of racial reckoning. The right is going to try to convince you that we need to ban critical race theory, intersectionality, structural racism, implicit bias, diversity training.
Implicit bias is not a real thing.
1619 Project.
Yes.
But understand that this organized, well-funded, and coordinated campaign
bingo square.
isn't an
bingo square. Everyone gets a free bingo square. Holy shit, this video. Wow. Okay, we have to watch the whole thing and then we can talk. I have so many feelings about this so far, but let's watch the whole thing and then we can talk about our feelings.
An honest debate about these ideas. Most couldn't even define what these ideas are. And that's the point. They want to scare and silence our society back to colorblind submission, where George Floyd and Black people's killability is just a natural, everyday feature of American life. Unproblematic, unchangeable, and disconnected from the history of anti-Black racism. From the criminalization of abolitionist literature to the McCarthy-era witch hunts, we've seen the government respond to liberatory movements through the repression of anti-racist ideas time and time again. If you are concerned about these efforts to censor history, to muzzle anti-racist speech, to expand voter suppression, and to criminalize protest, we urge you to join us in standing up for racial justice. We need to fight back like our lives depend on it, because they do.
Oh my God. Okay. Everyone needs to take a drink. If you have alcohol in front of you now, like, give me a minute. What the hell was that? That was all. Okay, so the AAPF, African American Policy Forum, that is Kimberly Crenshaw's organization. She is the executive director of that organization. Everything in that video was complete and total propaganda. That was all propaganda. And of course, it featured one of the lies that they love to tell so much, which is, well, you don't even know how to define critical race theory. Of course, we know how to define critical race theory. Critical race theory is an ideology that started in academia in the 1970s. It says racism exists everywhere, in every person, in every institution, in every interaction. And the job of the critical race theorist is to explore how, not if, how racism has occurred in every single circumstance. That is because racism is always assumed to have occurred. James Lindsay puts an even finer point on it when he says that critical race theory is the belief that racism is the fundamental organizing principle of society. That is what critical race theory is. And you'll notice, watching this presentation, I guarantee you, Kimberly Crenshaw will not define critical race theory in this entire presentation. She might say critical race theory is taught in law schools, or critical race theory is a lens at which we view the world. She is not going to give a concrete definition to what critical race theory is in this entire presentation because they can't. They can't. We have yet to watch, and we have been doing happy hour almost all year. We have yet to watch one single video in which they have defined critical race theory. Have you guys noticed that? They have literally never defined it. But we can, but they like to project onto us all the time. That video was insane. I really wonder if Rufo's seen that video. I don't know. I haven't seen him talk about it, so I don't know if he's even seen that. I'm definitely going to be letting him know. I'm going to clip that video for sure. George Andre Veloso Nunez says, I might need to add some scotch to my tea after that presentation, or maybe something stronger. Well, I just like to think that this presentation just lays the groundwork. And I'm going to give you a tip. If you got a free bingo square, they didn't do a land blessing. So, like, if you have land blessing, well, everyone got a free bingo square. But if you have land blessing on your bingo card, that might be a really great way to use it, because I didn't hear them do a land blessing. So let's keep going.
Kimberly Crenshaw is the co-founder and executive director of the African American Policy Forum. She's also the faculty director for the Center for Intersectionality and Social Policy Studies at Columbia. She's the co-editor of Critical Race Theory, Key Documents That Shaped the Movement. We have 2 copies at a desk right over here if you want to get your hands on a newly reissued, right, Mark? Newly reissued copy of this book. You can by signing the sign-up sheet. She's also the awardee. She was awarded recently the Ruth Bader Ginsburg Lifetime Achievement Award by the women's section of the Association of American Law Schools. Devin Carbado is the Honorable Harry Pragerson Professor of Law at UCLA Law School and the former Associate Vice Chancellor of Bruin-X for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. He teaches constitutional criminal procedure.
If they say this, I'm just gonna start making up my own rules for bingo, by the way, just to like make things fun and keep things interesting. If they say anywhere in this presentation, critical race theory is only taught in law schools, everyone gets a free bingo square. People are, I'm going to facilitate a blackout bingo by making my own rules, because it's my channel. I can do what I want.
Constitutional law, critical race theory, and criminal adjudication. He's the author of Acting White, Rethinking Race in Post-Racial America. So let me start with you, Kim, by taking us back to your first engagement, really, with critical race theory, taking us back to a time not entirely unlike this one, in the 1980s. Some progress had been made. Some backlash was brewing. What was going on?
So thank you, Laura, and thank you, Mark, New Press, for co-sponsoring this with us. It's really a pleasure to be here, and a relief, actually, to have some people that we can talk to about this madness, who hopefully can understand where this madness is going, unless we figure out a way to interrupt it.
She's saying that people like us don't understand what we're doing. And it's only people like them that can put a stop to these simple peons like us and our madness, if you will. Hang on, I see a super chat coming. I'm just waiting for a pop up. There it is. Nathaniel says the left demands you define CRT and to be uncomfortable, feature not bug. That is exactly right. Every single time they want, and this is why, guys, but this is why we have to be better. This is why we have to be on our game. This is why I repeat the definition of critical race theory ad nauseum over and over and over again every single time we do this, because you guys need to know what it is. So when they say, well, you don't even know what critical race theory is, and it's not going to come from people like this, it's going to come from like left-wing, like useful idiots in your community that are at the school board meeting with you. And they're going to say, well, you don't even know what critical race theory is. And then you can say, critical race theory is an ideology that started in law schools in the 1970s that says racism exists everywhere in every person and everything and every interaction. And the job of the critical race theorist is to explore how racism occurs in every single circumstance, because racism is always assumed to have occurred. Or you could say, James Lindsay says that critical race theory is the belief that racism is the fundamental organizing principle of society. We need to be able to spit these things out. We don't know looking up in the encyclopedia. If someone says to you, well, you don't even know how to define critical race theory, you need to be able, yes, I do. Here's what it is. No hesitation. That is what's going to put them on their ass.
So when my first encounter with critical race theory was its absence. And by that, I mean, I was one of the post-civil rights generation. You would call us the kids who watched the civil rights movement on television, really wanted to be part of it, grew up with people like Thurgood Marshall being heroes in the household. So I was raised by race men and women of the 20th century with a sort of sense that there would come a time where we would be handed the baton, and our task was figuring out how to pass it on to the next generation. And my commitment was to do so as a lawyer. I wanted to learn how to do the special abracadabra to open up American society to continue the progress that had been made by that generation just before. Went to Cornell, studied in Africana Studies and Government, went to Harvard to study with Derek Bell. Derek Bell, as you know, was the Harvard law professor,
I understand.
author
I didn't realize
of
she
Race,
studied with
Racism,
Derek
and
Bell.
American Law. I fell in love with the book as an undergraduate. He had a lithograph in the front page of Tommy Smith and John Carlos in that Black Power salute at the Olympics, which in my mind conveyed the idea that you can run the race, you can win the race, and you can also stand up for racial justice in doing so, that these two things are not mutually exclusive. I understood that to be the way in which he addressed law. And this is what I and a whole cohort of students who went to Harvard Law School in 1980, I'm not going to say the number, went there looking for Derek Bell. As they said about Elvis, he had left the building when we got there, having been frustrated about the slow progress of racial integration on the faculty, having been frustrated with the notion that diversity seemed to apply to students, but not so much to what the curriculum offered and what kind of scholarship was deemed to be legitimately included in an elite law school like Harvard. Our sensibility as students who, as I said before, watched the civil rights movement was that this was the new lunch counter for us. This is the new site of demand for services. This was the new space where the ever evolving movement for racial justice was to take place. So we simply made what we thought was a quite reasonable expectation vocal, namely, we want the courses that Derek Bell taught to be taught. We are consumers here. We think that this should be part of what we have a right to have. And while you're at it, you need to do something to integrate this faculty, because having one tenured person of color out of a faculty of about 70 is just not what this new world is supposed to be looking like. So these were our expectations, our demands. The law school didn't see eye to eye with us. That very year, they hired 10 white male junior faculty members, basically saying that there were no qualified people of color that they could find to come to teach at Harvard Law School. That began a multi-year struggle between students and the faculty to get them to walk the walk and talk the talk. It's okay to say that you're diverse, but it's not enough just to diversify the student body. And what was important to us and why it was a moment of awakening for us, Laura, was that the language of exclusion was now framed in terms of merit, in terms of colorblindness. We weren't talking about the Jim Crow of the South. We weren't talking about University of Texas, for example, that explicitly excluded African Americans. We were talking about an elite institution that actually admitted its first African American student in the 19th century, but didn't hire its first African American faculty until the late 1960s. So the language was language that said, we are not excluding people because of race, we're excluding them because the pool is shallow, without talking about how the pool is peopled in the first place, right? A pool that is based on the exclusions of the past is always going to be shallow unless you interrogate whether those exclusions were.
I don't know why these people think that you can just snap your fingers when you are working as a recruiter and drum up the perfect diverse candidate in every single equation. It just doesn't work like that. If they didn't have the candidates, they didn't have the candidates. Now, I'm not going to argue that Harvard probably didn't do as well as it could, because quite frankly, Harvard sometimes changes slow. And so in the 80s, I bet, you know what? I'm going to throw her a bone. I bet this was absolutely a legitimate complaint to make in the 80s about Harvard pulling this type of shit, because I have enough experience with Harvard to know this is exactly the type of bullshit that Harvard would do. However, that does not mean that you can snap your fingers and put together a candidate pool with your perfect mix of candidates where the highest quality candidates are automatically going to be of a certain skin color. And what Kimberly Crenshaw is arguing is that we should be hiring people purely on the basis of their skin color, which is not legal. It is not legal to hire anyone based on any criteria that does not directly relate to their ability to do the job effectively. It's not legal. That's what she's arguing for, is an illegal hiring practice. George Andre Velasco Nunez says, sorry, lady, if you went to law school in the 1980s, the exact year wouldn't matter much to calculate your age. What kind of record facilitated by the exact year she went to school is she trying to hide? And I'm sure we could figure out exactly when she went to school. I also, to be really blunt, I call bullshit on the fact that she's arguing that Derek Bell left Harvard because Harvard didn't have enough like African-American faculty members. Bullshit. I don't believe that for one red second. Not one red second. I don't know why he left, but I'm going to bet you all the money in my bank account that it was not actually for that reason. Nitical race theory. Yes. I like that.
Just and legitimate, and whether we need to rethink how we go about determining who's qualified to teach at Harvard Law School. Remember, we had a civil rights revolution in the 50s and 60s that produced Brown versus Board of Education. Where did the intellectual capacity for that revolution come from? It wasn't from Harvard. It wasn't from Yale, Stanford, University of Chicago. It was from Howard. So one would think.
So why didn't you go to Howard, Kimberly?
To truly dismantle the exclusions of the past, they have to think about how those.
Then why did she choose to go to Harvard and not Howard? That was a choice that she made. She could have made a different choice.
Exclusions are actually being reproduced in so-called qualifications of the present. And that's effectively what we students were about. So the short of it is, we pulled together all of our resources. We created a lecture series, which we called our alternative course. We invited all of those unqualified people of color around the country to come to Harvard and teach a chapter out of Derek Bell's book. Fast forward, all of those faculty members, those of us who were students, came together about 5 years later under the rubric of what I then named critical race theory. There was no critical race theory before. We just invited people to new developments in critical race theory. There was a critical mass of people who understood the limitations of conventional civil rights law, understood the limitations of diversity as applied to elite and other professional institutions, read many of the same texts, talked about these limitations in terms of not being natural but artificial, and dedicated ourselves to rewriting how racial equity should be understood. And that became the focal point of critical race theory. So that's the beginning, Laura.
So, Devin, we in this country are very sort of, we tend to be, we in the US, we tend to be a little bit sort of skittish about that word theory. Sounds a little bit scary. Can you talk about how you came into this critical race theory discussion, and what do we really actually mean?
Sure. Well, first, it's great to have the opportunity to engage you all in this way. So thank you very much for coming. I would say that my foray into critical race theory probably occurred in 3 chapters. Chapter 1, I get admitted to law school. I'm traveling to visit the law school.
Yes, exactly.
I
Law
have
school.
A hoodie with the words Harvard Law School on it. I'm walking through the terminal at the airport, and 2 people are walking by. One of them says to the other, loud enough for me to hear, "Harvard must be lowering its standards." Moment 1. I go to law school. Moment 2, and look at the configuration of the faculty, which is a clear indication.
I don't believe that happened,
indeed
by the way.
Harvard
I
must
don't
be
believe that
lowering its
happened.
standard, because there are
Listen.
very, very few people.
When you go like you can throw a rock in Boston and hit a stand at which you can buy a Harvard sweatshirt. People I do not believe that happened for 1 red second. He is a liar.
Who look like me on that faculty. Moment 3, I'm taking courses in various dimensions of law, including a particular course that I would end up teaching called Constitutional Criminal Procedure, which is a course that explores the constitutional constraints placed on police investigatory practices, meaning what does the Constitution have to say about the terms on which police can engage us on the street. This course is happening against the backdrop of the Rodney King, brutalization of Rodney King. And yet the topic of race, even in that moment, is being suppressed, which is to say, trying to put race on the table against the backdrop of the police
90s.
violence that was captured on film was understood as a disruptive moment, as a moment in which the core issues of law were being subordinated to the raw dimensions of politics. Does that sound a little bit familiar with respect to what might be happening right now? Fast forward to my
Not at all, actually.
ending up at UCLA. And one of the reasons I chose to go to UCLA as a faculty member, quite frankly, was because Kim was on the faculty at that particular point. You can imagine, I'm going to join the faculty with Kim Crenshaw.
Wait.
So
So you're telling me that you live in such a racist society that you had multiple options about where you could have gone and taught law, even though you're not white. You still had many options of where you could have been a faculty member to teach law, and you happened to choose UCLA, which is an extremely hard place to get an offer from in the first place. So that makes me believe there were other offers that were good too. And listen, if you're getting an offer at UCLA, I have to actually believe you have some game. I have to believe it's not actually just because of the color of your skin, because again, it is actually it's an extremely hard place to get hired at. But you're going to tell me that we live in such a racist society that you had all these options, that UCLA was one of your options, but racism? Okay, that doesn't make any sense. Carl G says, excuse me, how does a law professor know what is being taught to kids in school? She has a special experiential knowledge. She knows exactly what's being taught to kids in schools. She knows exactly. They all know. They're just trying to gaslight all of us. They all know. This is not there are dozens of books about critical race theory in education. They know what's being taught in schools.
I said yes. They had no idea that they had me at, here's an offer. I played a little bit hard to get. So I'm teaching a course, the same
So
course.
not only did he get hired at UCLA, but he played hard to get with UCLA in this incredibly racist institution and environment. Okay.
Course, Constitutional Criminal Procedure. And this goes to the point that Laura is raising about theory. So many of us have heard the term driving while black. To put that more precisely, many of us have experienced it. I could ask you to show of hands, but you don't have to put your hands up if you don't want to. But we understand what that means. A, you're driving a car. B, you're black. C, you're gonna be stopped. That's a theory. The theory is there's something about my embodiment that tells me that when I get in a car, there is a likelihood that I'm going to be stopped. Doesn't mean that I necessarily will be, but the data suggests that likely I will. And the theory is about the degree to which criminality has been written into blackness. So there's a particular case, Wren versus United States. How many of you know this case? All right, one person knows this case. I will ask you your name afterwards. Not just yet. So here's the basic facts of this case, and here's why I think we should all know this case. So imagine I'm driving about the street right after this event. Imagine Laura is driving about the street right after the event. The police see both of us commit a traffic infraction. There's no dispute about that. Cop A says to Cop B, well, both of them committed traffic infraction. We can't stop both of them, so let's stop the black person. And for purposes of absolute clarity, let's stipulate that I'm the black person, not Laura. So they stop me. I want to say that's unconstitutional. In other words, you see both of us committed a traffic infraction, but you decide to stop me because I'm black.
Okay, so how are you going to prove that they stopped you because you're black? And what does your skin color have to do with the fact that you broke the law? I mean, I'm not unsympathetic to the situation. I absolutely believe that sometimes things like this occur. 100%. 100%. You won't convince me otherwise. But you still broke the law, dude. George Andre Veloso Nunez says he's forgetting something. Was the car red? Cops are racist against red drivers. Yeah, cops are more likely to pull over people in red cars. If you don't break the law, you have a substantially less chance of being pulled over. There's so many assumptions. Well, and this is the foundation of critical race theory, right? If something adverse happens to someone that is not white, racism has got to be the answer. All other possible explanations are excluded. Are they not? What would happen? What would happen if those same cops had that same discussion and they said, well, because of the Black Lives Matter riots, we can't stop the black guy. We have to stop the white lady. It's exactly the same situation in reverse. Is that still wrong, according to him? I'm gonna bet he would be completely 100% okay with that under the assumption that racism equals power plus prejudice, and so you can't be racist against white people. I'm sure he'd be pretty okay with that.
That's got to be unconstitutional. A unanimous Supreme Court says under Fourth Amendment law that is not unconstitutional. Now, you don't look shocked enough. Fourth Amendment protects us from unreasonable searches and seizures.
You broke the law. You're talking about a
unreasonable
scenario in which you broke the
for you
law.
to stop me on the basis of race. That's an unreasonable seizure.
Dude,
The courts
you weren't stopped on the basis of your race. You were stopped because you broke the law. Those are two different things. You stipulated in the beginning of this example that you broke the law. You weren't stopped on the basis of your race.
response to that is, well, if the cop had probable cause to stop you, you committed a traffic infraction, Devon. So you cannot then say that the stop was unreasonable, even though it was racially motivated.
Exactly.
One more dimension of this court's ruling, and then I will stop. The court also, in this opinion, says Let's say an officer wishes to use the fact that you commit a traffic stop to investigate some other crime for which the officer has no reason to think you did anything wrong. So you stopping me based on the traffic infraction to investigate whether I've done something else wrong. We would call this a pretextual stop. The traffic stop is a pretext to investigate some other crime. Is that constitutional? Yes. That's reasonable, right? Part of what I'm trying to suggest is having a conversation about race.
If you
about that
don't
is
commit
not
crimes,
to take us off track.
then you
It
have a
is to reveal
substantially
the ways in
lower
which race is
likelihood
embedded
that
in
this is
legal
going to
doctrine.
happen.
And indeed, if you don't forego race in that way, you're not learning the law. So many of you don't know this case, but it's a case that is the legal backdrop for the driving while black phenomenon. We should all know this case. We should all know that racial profiling, at least by this particular metric, has been constitutionalized. This is what the Against CRT move is trying to silence.
What?
And this is why we need to push back.
No,
So
That is
can you-
completely
would
wrong.
Thank you, Devin.
that is completely and totally wrong.
Let me ask you, Kim, to add to this, are there more ways that we need to understand this? And why, in your case, for example, was it law that you wanted to go into?
Because
Why
critical
is
race
law
theory started in
so
law
important
schools.
in this context?
Yeah. Well, so there are two moves that we can see in Devin's explanation that I want people just to hold with them when you hear that critical race theory is being taught in the schools. And it's this nefarious anti-American insurgency that we have to stop if we want to save Western civilization. So the first thing is,
You know what? I have to actually give her credit. Because the fact that she even understands that critical race theory is an anti-American insurgency that is out to stop Western civilization, that to me tells me she's paying more attention to the anti-CRT movement than she wants us to actually think. And it also to me tells me that she knows exactly what she's doing. The fact that she was just able to articulate it. Listen, that Devin dude, he has absolutely no idea what our argument is. If he thinks our argument is in any way, shape, or form related to the argument that he just made, he is nuts. He is not paying attention at all. He is not listening at all. Kimberly Crenshaw was just able to articulate clearly what part of the problem is. Not the whole problem. It was a single sentence. Okay, there's not a lot of nuance. We can go in many different ways. But she's paying attention and she knows exactly what our argument is and she knows exactly what she's doing. That's what she just told me there.
we do critical race theory every day. So every time
really?
you heard Devin speak, every time you know that you're entering a space in which your blackness may shape the interaction that you're likely to experience, you are practicing critical race theory.
Every time you enter a space where your blackness could shape the experience, you're practicing critical race theory. Giorgio says, how far away can a cop tell the skin color of a driver? I think that's a really good question. I think that's a very good question. I don't know the answer to that.
It is an understanding of how we navigate the world. What are some of the things that may happen and how those things will be triggered by the encounter with our embodied beings. That's critical race theory. The second part of critical race theory is the part that few people know, and that is that much of what shapes our racial lives in this country is facilitated by law. So Devin gave you a great example of how driving while black is facilitated by law. This basic observation is what is so controversial, because there are those who want you to think that the terms of racial life in this country are basically determined by our agency, what we choose to do and what we choose not to do, by our culture, by our individual orientation, not by what the law helps to facilitate. So if you came in thinking that the law is like this neutral referee, it basically, does justice by deciding who's right, whose wrong, whose rights are are privileged, whose rights have been violated. I hope that that is an idea that you leave at the door. Because what we talk about and what we look at is how law is not necessarily the neutral referee. Law actually creates the game. It creates the equipment. It tells which side has scored and how in the next game they come back with even more power in the negotiation than they had at the beginning. This is not a conventional way in which we've been taught to think about civil rights law. We've been taught to think about civil rights law as this thing that does good. We haven't been taught to think about law as actually having created what race is. We haven't thought.
If she names, well, no, I'm not going to say that. I was about to do a reverse like bingo bonus. So I'm going to bet that she will not be able to name one single solitary law or one single solitary statute that is currently on the books today that causes more racial disparities. If we're going to talk about the law, I want an example, just one of a single law or a single statute that results in racial disparities. And then once we have that and we have evidence that it is actually resulting in racial disparities, then we can go and repeal that law. We can pass a new law. I have no problem with that. I'm going to bet you she does not name one.
Thought about laws creating what kinds of accoutrements, goals.
And by the way, so Kurt just said, now she says law creates race. That's very strange. So it's not strange, Kurt, when you understand that they believe that whiteness was created when European settlers came over to the United States, because prior to them coming over to the United States, they weren't called white. They were called like Irish or English or Italian or any of these things, right? So they believe that whiteness was not created until the United States, and whiteness was created as a way to keep white people in power and keep black people out of power. That's what she means.
Along with being racialized as white as opposed to being racialized as not white. And we haven't thought about the rules that get put into play in deciding whether our claims of discrimination are going to be affirmed or not. So here's another case you should know. Washington versus Davis. How many of you have heard of that case? So, and before we go on, I want to do something else. How many of you have heard of Roe versus Wade? Okay, I just want you to hold on to that for a moment, right? Because we all know about Roe versus Wade. We all know that that was a foundational.
How many of you have heard of Brown versus Board of Education? Raise your hands in the chat. How many of you have heard of Brown versus Board of Education?
Case in deciding a woman's right to choose. Washington versus Davis was equally foundational, but in the opposite direction and with respect to race. The quick facts are these. Washington, D.C. Used a civil service exam to determine which applicants to become police officers would be allowed to matriculate into officer training school. This civil service test did
Everyone's
not
heard of
test
Brown versus
skills
Board of
necessary
Education.
to be a police officer anywhere, much less in what they call an urban environment. Basically, much less what makes a good police officer among Black folk. Nonetheless, the test was used, and the rate of failure for African Americans was 4 times the rate of failure for white folks, which basically meant it was extraordinarily hard for an African American to actually be permitted to enroll in the training program. Now, Black officers sued. They said this was unconstitutional. It was discrimination, and it was not reasonable or rational. There was no reason to use this civil service exam, which basically was a vocabulary test, testing the vocabulary of a certain cohort of Americans and not the vocabulary of another cohort, particularly the vocabulary of the people that they were going to police.
Black people have different vocabulary? Can anyone who's Black in the chat, and I know there are at least a couple, can anyone explain to me how Black people have a different vocabulary? I'm not talking about like nuance. I'm not talking about like words here, words there. Like, you know, that's true of any event. Like, that's true of people based on geographic location. Like, I don't call soda Coke. There are people in the world that in the United States that call all soda Coke, regardless of whether it's not actually a Coke, right? Or pop or any of those things. I'm not talking about that, but do Black people have their own vocabulary that I'm not aware of? That would be relevant in terms of a civil service exam? Well, okay. Some people are saying some do. Okay, fair enough. Is she saying you have to speak jive to work in a Black neighborhood? I think that's kind of like, I'm trying not to like be that blunt about it, but that's kind of like which seems a little bit racist to me. Okay.
The Supreme Court ultimately decided that this was not discrimination. It's not discrimination because in the decision to use this civil service exam, there was no evidence that the decision makers were doing it because of animus against African Americans. No record to suggest that they did it simply because they hated Black people. No evidence that they were biased intentionally against them. The only evidence was they chose to use the test, notwithstanding the fact that it wasn't correlated.
This is what I'm getting at right here. This is exactly what I'm getting at. Like, are we assuming that Black people can't use proper English? Because I don't want to make that assumption. Now, I'm not talking again about their cultural eccentricities in language. I get that, right? I say wicked because I'm from the Northeast. People outside the Northeast generally don't say wicked. It's just, and there are a number of different, like we could probably go on for days about the different uses of language based on where you grew up. But like the implication that Black people don't know how to use proper English, that's a bit troublesome for me, and it sounds a little bit racist. That's all I'm saying.
To being a good police officer, and it disproportionately excluded Black people. Now, what did we get out of that moment? What we got out of that moment is an incredible narrowing of the field of discrimination. So all of the things that employers often did that had nothing to do with who is best for the job, it was just they were used to doing it, or sometimes they used these tests with the knowledge that it was going to disproportionately exclude African Americans. The Supreme Court ended up saying that discrimination is none of those things. The only thing discrimination is when you set upon a course of action with the express intent of harming people because of their skin color. Now, it's not as though that's not a story about race discrimination, but it's a small story about race discrimination. And it's a small story about how you can be harmed by decisions that other people make that have nothing to do with your ability to do the job. So Washington versus Davis was decided in the mid-70s. It was
George Andre Veloso Nunez says British was the longest standing Black slavery institute, or Brazil, sorry, not British, god dang, Brazil. I think I said British. I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. I have like sucked down this cider in record time. I'm almost ready for another drink. Brazil was the largest standing Black slavery institution. We only abolished it in 1888, and the US was the shortest. Well, that doesn't really matter. Guys, we've been going for about an hour now, so I just want to remind you to mount that like button if you haven't already. If you are not subscribed to my channel on whatever platform you're watching on, be it my first YouTube channel, my second YouTube channel, Actively Unwoke, Rockfin, Odyssey, Facebook, please make sure you subscribe. We do this every Friday at 3 p.m., except for next Friday, because I'm going to be in England. I'm going to be in London. If you are in London, I will be doing a meetup on November 21st, and information on that meetup is available in my locals at kb.locals.com.
For all intents and purposes, a line that was being drawn in the sand. It was saying that all of these ways in which institutions structure opportunities in ways that disproportionately exclude us will not be subject to constitutional adjudication. That meant that the forward momentum of the civil rights movement ran up against a wall. And it ran up against the wall while we were in law school. So we saw the rationalizations happening. We saw the fact that the long-term consequences of this were basically met with a shrug by many of our law professors. It was recognizing that the legal rules were creating an end to the civil rights movement, not dying of natural success. It was not because we got to a point where everything was good. It got to a point where the law said, that's enough. We're not going to go any further. And that became the moment where the backward cycle, in which we'll talk about in a minute, affirmative action litigation started to come on board.
Okay, so I just finished my drink and I'm gonna pour my second one. I just looked at the alcohol content on this dessert mouse beer. It's 9.5%. 9.5%. All right. I'm gonna instead opt for the Berrylicious Sour. Let's see if this comes out in a pretty color. I don't normally like sours like for like the whole thing, so we're just gonna have to see how this goes. But let's see if it comes out in a pretty color. It's pink. It's pink. Wow. Look at that pretty, pretty beer. Yeah, 9.5 for a beer is like a lot. It's not the highest, but it's a lot. Look at how pretty. It looks like a sangria. All right, let's take a sip. Oh, it's pretty good. Definitely a sour, but pretty good. Again, this is Pipe Dream Brewing in Londonderry, New Hampshire. Berrylicious Sour Ale.
So far, so good. We getting an idea of what critical race theory actually is?
No.
In a minute, we're going to move to all the things that it is not.
No, no, no. They haven't defined it. I'm sorry. I shouldn't yell at you. But you remember when I told you that they weren't going to define critical race theory? They haven't defined it. And now this moderator is like, so do we all understand? And everyone in the crowd is going, yes, yes. And they're probably all wearing masks. They're like, yes, yes, we understand what they haven't defined it. There has been no definition of critical race theory at all. They've only talked about their lived experiences. That's it.
Not. But before we do that, I just want to underscore. And
God, George with the super chat. I'm not going to complain, George, but thank you for the support. I appreciate you as always. Says slavery is the core of systemic racism argument. In my experience, if America is so racist, why did you guys stop slavery so quickly? They would make the argument that we did not stop slavery quickly enough, and that is why we will be racist forever and ever and ever and ever.
Ask you, and maybe ask you, Devon, if what I'm hearing is right. You've talked about the shift from a structural perspective on racism to an individual one, the individual motivation of somebody. That sounds a lot like what we hear all the time when somebody says, oh, it's just a few bad apples. It's not a tainted tree. And that's convenient for a whole lot of people who would prefer not to deal with the friggin' tree if we could just deal with the apples. Is that oversimplifying, Devon? And then we're going to play a video to recap, to assess whether we've all really figured this out. And then we're going to give you a chance to answer some questions about this part of the conversation. So if you have questions, you'll raise your hand and Mark will run around with a microphone, maybe this microphone. So prepare a question. But Devon, is that oversimplifying? Have we moved from sort of the tree to the apple?
So I don't think that's oversimplified. I just want to underscore a point that Kim makes, because sometimes the argument is rehearsed that law lacks.
I just want to point out that woman in the blue suit, the inside of her blazer matches the shirt that she's wearing. So you know that was like some JCPenney like pantsuit special, because the inside of the blazer literally matches the shirt she's wearing. That doesn't have anything to do with anything. It's just something I noticed.
The capacity to deal with a range of social problems. And true, you cannot litigate your way out of racial inequality writ large. But think about Washington versus Davis for just one more minute. Because you could say that, what's the legal solution to that? The court is saying, look, intentional discrimination is the only doctrinal option here.
Carl G says, CRT claims to make people better. It is a religion. It is a religion. That is specifically why James Lindsay's definition of critical race theory says it is a belief. It is a belief system. He was very intentional about saying it is a belief that racism is the structural organizing principle of society. He's trying to point specifically to the fact that it is a religion, it is a belief system, it is not based on evidence, it is a faith.
You could say, no, it isn't. Another option is disparate impact, right? That disparate impact is going to be the basis for understanding discrimination. But let's say that you don't like that option either. There's still another option. You could simply say, look, against the backdrop, we're talking about the 1970s. We are just up from Jim Crow in the 1970s. You could say, look, if you have a policy that causes a disparate impact, then justify it. Justify the policy. And if you can't justify the policy by telling us that this particular policy relates to some underlying interest, in this instance, being a police officer, then it's got to go. That's not a radical, unreasonable argument. That's a pretty modest argument to deal with the fact of underrepresentation against the backdrop of de jure racial discrimination.
Denzer Foster says slavery lasted less than 100 years since the foundation of the United States in 1776. There are individuals who are alive today who have been alive longer than the institution of slavery was alive in our country. That is a great point. And listen, no one here says we should go back to the good old days of yore. We don't even want to go back to the good old days of the 1950s because there are, and I'm going to say this and I'm going to continue to maintain this position. There are absolutely still questions and problems that we need to deal with regarding race in this country. I don't believe that all opportunity is available to everyone who wants it, regardless of the color of their skin. I just fundamentally don't think that's true. I think there are a lot of discussions we can have on how to make more opportunities available to everyone, regardless of your skin color. I just think that critical race theory gets in the way of those conversations. It does not facilitate those conversations. It does not create. Critical race theory creates more racism, not less.
The court doesn't entertain any of that because it's interested in putting in place a narrow understanding of discrimination that lines up with the bad apple frame. And we're familiar with the bad apple frame because it pervades discourses, for example, about police officers. I'm not interested in having a conversation about whether police officers are good or bad. That, to me, misses the point. The issue is, what are the sources of police power? And if I'm thinking about addressing the problem of police violence, I want to know, one, what are the social forces that put Black people in contact with the police to begin with? So then I have to think about segregation. I have to think about mass criminalization, by which I mean the criminalization.
Am I living in a reality in which segregation is still legal in this country? If I am, where is segregation still legal in this country? Am I wrong to say that segregation has been pretty much, well, these people love segregation. By the way, these people want to bring segregation back. They're segregating in schools right now. They segregate employee trainings all the time. Where is segregation still legal in this country?
Of really minor stuff. I have to think about poverty. I have to think about a bunch of stuff about why Black people are having these contacts. That's
you know what? Okay, you want to think about poverty?
Substructure.
You want to think about poverty? Let's put an entrepreneurship program in every single underserved high school in this country. If I have to like mitigate the impact of the public schools, I think one of the ways that we can do that is to look at communities that are typically underserved economically, typically lower socioeconomic status communities, and prioritize those communities to get entrepreneurship programs put in the high schools. Teach kids how to build a business. Teach them how to start a business. I would have absolutely no problem with this. And, it's not exactly fair in terms of like equality. This is like an equity solution. I'm advocating for equity right now. I'm advocating that communities that are typically lower socioeconomic status should be a higher priority to teach people how to be entrepreneurs. Put entrepreneurship programs in those high schools or prioritize entrepreneurship programs in those high schools. You will have absolutely no argument from me at all. Equity.
Second, I have to think about police culture. I have to think about police unions. I have to think about police self-governance. None of these are about good or bad cops. Third, I have to think about, okay, so what happens when violence happens? How does the legal system process it? I have to think about police violence equals justifiable force. That happens way too much. That's not about good or bad cops. I have to think about qualified immunity, which remind me to come back to, but not just yet. I have to think about qualified immunity. I have to think about the extent to which you cannot sue police departments. These are not good and bad cop problems. They're broad structural ones that you miss if what you're doing is focusing on whether this individual cop engaged in an individual act of violence against an individual person and therefore is bad because it was intentional discrimination. Of course that happens, but it's under-inclusive of how racism
You're on it, Janice.
operates.
All right.
So
I
you
believe in
said
you.
social
I believe in you,
forces.
Janice.
What the right is saying right now is that critical race theory is just a product of nasty European Marxism.
No, that's not actually, well, I mean, it is the foundation of critical race theory, let's be honest. It comes out of the Frankfurt School, it does. George Andreveloso Nunez says, in New York, 2 Black women were denied service for not being vaxxed, but that law is not racist. But according to them, it should be considered so. Yes, this is a very good point, because Ibram X. Kendi, who has blocked me on Twitter, refuses to say that the vaccine passports in New York are racist, even though they cause racial disparities, which Ibram X. Kendi has defined racism as anytime there's a racial disparity, but he refuses to say that vaccine passports are racist for some reason, even though they are a clear racial disparity.
You say social forces, a whole lot of people say, well, there you have it. They're
No,
saying it's about social forces.
this woman
Must
is
be
an
Marxist
idiot.
originated.
This woman is
Is
an
it?
idiot.
Well,
Sorry. Not sorry.
Easy way to answer that question is to think about the extent to which critical race theorists make deep and profound arguments about what the Constitution needs to deliver for everyone.
So amend the
So critical race
Constitution,
theory is
dude.
fundamentally about asking the United States to live up.
So why aren't you trying to amend the Constitution? If you have an issue with the Constitution, there is a literal process to amending the Constitution that is laid out in, wait for it, the Constitution. Amend the Constitution.
To justice, to live up to equality, to live up to liberty, to live up to its
She's
own
an idiot.
aspirations.
She's not smart. She just speaks confidently. She's not smart.
That's the fundamental project. You say equality under law is what people should experience. We say, let's realize it. You say justice is what everyone deserves. We say, then let's deliver it. You say liberty should be a core feature of American democracy. We say, amen. So part of what critical race theory seeks to do is to ask the United States to live up to the very principles of democracy upon which it's founded. That's the core project. I don't see how one can conflate that project with Marxism.
We are going to go back to qualified immunity now or later? Later. All right. So let's look at a video, little recap. And then if you have
another video.
questions,
Excellent.
Pose them.
Let's hang on. I want to get the super chat in before the video. She's wearing a pantsuit with Snickers for starters. Yeah, she is. All right, let's watch a video. Oh.
If you Google critical race theory today, you're likely to encounter a slew of misinformation and fear-mongering from the right.
Critical race theory is a Marxist doctrine that rejects the vision of Martin Luther King Jr.
Just because I do not want critical race theory taught to my children in school does not mean that I'm a racist.
CRT looks beyond individual acts of racism and bigotry, and instead grapples with the structures and histories that have embedded racism into law and more broadly into society. Developed by a diverse group of anti-racist legal scholars in the 70s and 80s, critical race theory is a practice, a way of seeing connections between America's racial history and present-day inequality. We can't fight for racial justice if we can't see, speak, and learn about racial injustice.
That's it?
So anybody got
That's
questions?
it?
Anybody got questions?
That's it. Her definition of critical race theory is how we see connections in society. That's not a definition. I'm sorry. That does not count as a definition. That does not count as a definition. Critical race theory is how we see connections in society. No, you do not get credit for that.
Questions so far, right here. Thank you, sir.
It's a conspiracy theory. She just
Anyone else
it's
so
like
that
a
Mark
fucking
knows where to go
conspiracy
next?
theory.
Okay, then right behind in the white shirt, and then right
Hang
over
on,
here
sir.
in the other white shirt. Okay, go.
Okay, all right. So good afternoon, Dr. Crenshaw and Dr. Carbado. Thank you so much
They're not
for
doctors,
coming
they're
today
lawyers,
and-
different
and
thing.
speaking on this very important topic. So you mentioned that, with critical race theory, it's us asking the U.S. to take these concepts and to take these equities and make it, apply across the board and make it fair. For us who are lay people in this work and in this struggle, and also understanding that the Supreme Court's decision is the law of the land, and is also one of the fuels that supports this inequity. What then do we do? Do we drum up cases that then goes before the Supreme Court to then dismount or unmount those
They're all wearing
racist
masks.
precedences that are already there? Or is there something else that we need to be doing on the ground to expedite this call for U.S. to be equitable across the board?
All right, we'll take that question. And then Mark, if you can come to the woman here in the short sleeve white shirt. Right, that's you? Yep. And then you're coming here to the long sleeve white.
Thank you so much. So I'm involved with a national civics education organization, and the work of democracy education is intentionally being conflated with CRT, and some of the bills that are being passed around the country are censoring and canceling civics education.
No,
I'm
wrong.
interested in whether
None
or
of them
not
are doing
you
that.
observe or
Wrong.
believe that the avalanche of interest on the right around critical race theory is connected to the anti-democratic forces we've seen over the last several years around voter suppression leading up to January 6th, and the fact that this, in fact, has now come to bring more media attention than the coup on this government.
Great question. And the last one right here, Mark. This
The
gives our
coup.
guests
The
a chance to
coup.
think.
Hi, Dr.
The
Carbado. Since before you
insurrection.
touched on policing, I wanted to get your thoughts on the
I just want to point out, and I don't know what the connection is here, but I see a lot of people like wearing completely white outfits, which is kind of weird. Like they're in a church. And so the reason I bring this up is that like when I'm doing like spiritual retreats and stuff, we wear completely white outfits. It has to do with being pure and open and all that stuff. And like when you're going into spiritual ceremony, that's what you want to be, right? But I'm really confused about why I'm seeing so many people in completely white outfits at a presentation about critical race theory. Is this just a coincidence, or like is there something more? That's all.
policy in New York that was ruled unconstitutional, stop and frisk, and your thoughts on the incoming mayor wanting to bring that back.
Okay, so we have a question on what do lay people do if the challenge is the court? Is the answer more court cases? If not,
Kimberly
then what?
Crenshaw, totally white.
Is there a
Outfit,
link
not
between
skin.
vote suppression and the work against democracy that's happening, the anti-democracy backlash that we're seeing, and these attacks on critical race theory? And then the last one, New York looks likely to elect Eric Adams, former police officer, as mayor. He has said he will revisit stop and frisk, and in all likelihood reverse the suspension of that policy. Kim, who wants to go first? Devin.
I'll go with the stop and frisk question, in part because part of what's difficult about that litigation and the way it emerged in the context of New York is a profound misunderstanding about how the case came down. So let's go back in time to 1968. Just think about your favorite groove to get you there if you want. So in 1968, the Supreme Court is called upon to determine the constitutionality of stop and frisk. And what the court does in that moment is to say, look, police officers can stop you and frisk you. I'm simplifying things just a little bit, without
You
probable
think?
cause if you have reasonable suspicion. So reasonable suspicion is an evidentiary standard that's higher than a hunch, but lower than probable cause. So it ain't a hunch, but it's not probable cause, okay? That's reasonable suspicion. And the court says, and who
I'm not a fan of
is
stop
speaking
and
for the
frisk either,
court?
Jaya.
Justice
Yeah, I agree with
Warren.
that. I think that's dumb.
You know, and
The writer of-
the person who wrote Brown, I can digress and go into that hole, but then you'll say, come back, and I won't be able to come back, so I won't do that.
Come back.
I will simply say this. I'll simply say this. When the issue arises in New York, and the Judge Shinlin, who is the district court judge in that case, says New York police officers violated the Constitution, she did not declare stop and frisk unconstitutional. Stops and frisks have been constitutional. They are constitutional. The particular problem in New York was whether officers were even abiding by the reasonable suspicion standard. So her point was that in New York, police officers were stopping and frisking people even without reasonable suspicion, which is just a little bit more than nothing. So that was one basis on which she said what they were doing was constitutional, not that stops and frisks were unconstitutional. The second thing I will say is that the Judge Linden also said that the disparity and level of intentionality, racial intentionality in that case, suggested that New York police officers also violated the equal protection clause, that you're not treating people equally on the basis of race. But to be clear, stop and frisk has been a feature of policing for a long time. The New York litigation did not stop that. So when, plausible incoming mayor is saying he's returning to something, I don't know what exactly that means. It's more political talk and probably a particular disposition with respect to policing than an actual shift in the legal terrain.
Yeah. Kim, you want to pick up either of the other two
Yeah,
questions?
sure. I'll start with what do we do? And it somewhat goes to the question I asked earlier when I said, how many of us know Roe versus Wade versus how many of us know about Washington versus Davis? I could probably come up with 5 more cases that actually represents the unraveling of the forward movement of the civil rights movement. And we don't know about it, right? So one of the things that is most disconcerting about this moment is that we haven't even gotten to a point of recognition in our society that would justify any claim that critical race theory is everywhere. Because if it was everywhere, we would know these cases and we would know its impact, on our future. So just the very possibility that in different pockets in American society, people are thinking more critically about the state of our lives is enough to make the other side decide that they have to wipe it out. We're barely on the table, right? So,
oh yeah, you're barely
where
on the
does that
table,
leave?
Kimberly.
A couple things.
Okay.
Number one, literacy about the legal terms of our lives is absolutely essential if we believe that Black Lives Matter, right? It's not just a chant. Right? If it matters, we have to understand the legal terms by which our lives have been made not to matter. And a lot of that is in the law. The second thing then is that it also means that Supreme Court and just judicial appointments need to be seen as important as they are. And yet with voters who tend to vote Democratic, court appointments, they're kind of low on the list. Not so on the other side of the aisle. Not so. So those who want to wipe out progress on racial justice understand that the courts are absolutely essential to their long-term agenda. In fact, the courts that we have now are the product of a 30, 40-year campaign to basically retake the courts, while we have been focusing on other things. So the 2016 election, I think courts...
Hey, so I just want to pause real quick and say hi to the people watching on my second channel, Actively Unwoke. People seem concerned that they're not seeing enough pop up in the chat. It's because I see chats from 2 different YouTube channels, my main channel and Actively Unwoke. Just so you guys know, Happy Hour will be moving exclusively to Actively Unwoke in the new year. Okay? So I'm going to be taking it off of my main YouTube channel. It's going to be going on Actively Unwoke. I'm just doing it on both for right now to kind of get people used to this idea. So if you are subscribed on my main channel and you want to see Happy Hour in the future, please make sure Actively Unwoke is in the description below. And make sure you're subscribed to my second YouTube channel. Of course, you can also watch on Rockfin, Odyssey, all those places. But I do stream it on both for right now. And that's why you might be seeing less chats on Actively Unwoke. But it will be moving exclusively to Actively Unwoke in the new year.
For Democratic voters, we're like 4th or 5th on the list. That's too far down, considering the fact that courts determine the rules of the road. They determine how you get from point A to B. They determine what happens along the way. So I would say, number one, much more demand on our part to understand the role of the law in this. Much more support for.
Yes, Actively Unwoke is on YouTube. It's youtube.com/activelyunwoke. And so that's where we're going to be going. But we're doing it on both for right now just because I want to get people used to the idea, and I want to make sure I'm really doing it in case YouTube gives me a stupid strike on my main channel, and that way I can still do it on Actively Unwoke. That was why this all started in the first place. But just make sure you subscribe to both. That's it. We are going to be doing new content on Actively Unwoke in the new year. I'm kind of like ramping up for that. It's going to coincide with the book release. So that's what's going on there.
For the kind of critical thinking that is necessary for it to be explained. And lastly, we need to really foreground judicial appointments in our vetting of our candidates. We can't have candidates anymore who wait a couple years before they decide to take on the courts. The reality is, at this point in time,
they're basically pissed that
Marshall
Trump got so many
court
nominees.
That's how
why.
far to the other side things have gone. And when that's the situation, we cannot be surprised when we lose significant cases. And on the last question, the next section is precisely that: how to connect the dots between repression of civil voting, repression of protests, and repression of the very ideas, the very ability to speak anti-racism. They're all connected.
Thank you. So we'll come back to more of those answers in a bit, but let's move to this question of what work the attacks are doing. And we're sort of torn up here between emphasizing how specific this situation is and remembering that it is not unprecedented. So with, out wanting
George
to
says the link is not working. I'm sorry about that, George. I don't know what's going on there, but you can search and subscribe. It's Actively Unwoke. I don't know why it's not working. I'll have to look into that. Apologies. It says unavailable. Oh my God. All right. Give me a sec. I will put the link in the chat. Hang on.
Differences. I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit about threads that connect this work of myth making and attack that we're seeing around critical race theory with others that we have seen in the at least vaguely rememberable past. Okay.
So,
unless you had a plan to go in the other direction, in which you're completely entitled to do that.
When it comes around, you got to ride it because it might not come around again. So much of what we're experiencing right now is part of a cycle. And if we look at our own history, we see that every effort that we have made to make good on the promise of equality has been met by backlash. It's been met by retrenchment. We sometimes characterize that as 2 steps forward, 1 step back. That's part of how we understand our cycles. But I would propose that actually the situation might be more challenging than 2 steps forward, 1 step back. It may be 1 step forward, 2 steps back. Let's think about Reconstruction, right? After the end of slavery, our president at that point vetoed a civil rights bill that gave us equal rights to contracting, to own property, based on the argument that it was reverse discrimination against white people. We are just barely out of slavery, and doing anything for us
We're
is
just
seen
barely
as
out of
taking
wait.
something away from white people.
We're just barely out of slavery. We've been out of slavery actually for a really long time. Alexander DeJohn says, anyone notice how the woman in the center keeps going back to me? That's Kimberly Crenshaw. She's one of the founders of critical race theory. And yes, she does do a better man spread than James Lindsay does. You are absolutely right. Just barely out of slavery. My God.
20 years after that.
Oh, she's talking
civil
about
rights bills that give us free.
Okay, hang on. She's talking about Reconstruction. I may not have been paying close attention. Okay, I can admit when I'm wrong. I can. If I'm actually wrong, I will admit when I'm wrong. But if I'm not actually wrong, I will not admit that I'm wrong.
Equal access to trains and ends. That is struck down as unconstitutional, as giving us special privileges. At that same period of time, our right to vote is being denied by constitutional conventions across the South. That didn't last just for a season. That lasted a century. It wasn't just about one election. It was about 7 decades. So what
7 decades
know
is not a
is
century.
that often even symbolic measures of advance create such a deep backlash that it takes us decades to dig our ways out of it.
Democrats.
So if we want to look at this moment in this historical frame, we have to understand that part of what this is a reaction to last summer's George Floyd activation. But we also have to realize that George Floyd activation is still struggling to get legal reform based on that. Whereas the backlash has swept through red states and is now knocking at the door in purple states. This is the prescription for the same kind of 7-decade being pushed out of political power that we know that we came out of. So it is cyclical. It reproduces itself in ways that sometimes push us further back than where we started from. We've got to be able to recognize the patterns to interrupt them before the groove is so deep that it's difficult to stop it.
The groove is
this
deep,
thing
baby.
Has been going on
the
since
groove
September.
Is deep. It's been going
since
on
President Trump created.
It's actually been going on for longer than that, Kimberly, and you know that. Trump created those executive orders about critical race theory because of this. Because of this. Because I'm sorry, I'm going to take a moment of credit here. Trump created those executive orders about critical race theory because of stuff like this. Because I was paying attention back last goddamn summer when the city of Seattle was doing segregated training with their employees, had one training for white employees, completely different training for African-American employees. I put that information out there. Chris Rufo then followed up on that information, did reporting on it like a journalist, which is exactly what I wanted to happen. And because of Chris Rufo's work, which is based on the work that I was doing, Trump issued that executive order. So all of this was going on way before September.
An executive order to ban divisive concepts from diversity training in the government. Yes, President Biden rescinded it, and then it blew up all across the states. And we are still putting our boots on. You know, that saying that a lie gets around the world 3 times before truth puts its boots on. We are still looking for our boots. And we cannot afford this if we are going to survive this moment.
Citizens Renewing America, one of the nonprofits that's been training people and getting people to learn talking points to take into school boards and exposing, showing people.
I've never heard of
videos
this
to learn
organization,
what's so terrible
so
about
I don't
critical
know
race
what this
theory. It was headed
organization
up
is.
by
I've
the
never
guy
heard of
who
them.
headed the Office of Management and Budget. in
Oh,
Trump
Russ Voigt's
administration.
organization. Oh,
No, these people don't just go away.
Okay. That's Russ Voigt's organization. Okay, I do know this organization now. They're doing good work. I do know this organization. I just didn't know it was called that.
They stay active and they want back into office, but we nonetheless are kind of pathologically attached to this idea of progress, Devin. There are other myths that you wanted to draw to our attention, I think.
In some ways, there are too many for us to meaningfully engage, but I think it's important that we put into sharp relief several of them. So one classic myth that's been rehearsed even before this particular moment is that critical race theory believes that colorblindness is inherently, in every context, a problem. Now, if you find yourself arguing against that, not a pretty good place to be in. So I want to be clear about critical race theory's relationship to colorblindness, because this, we want to suggest, is really important.
This guy is an
Critical race
indoctrinated.
theory challenges the radicalization of colorblindness in the service of a number of different projects. So one, colorblindness gets radicalized to sort of turn a blind eye to problems of racial inequality. And this you see explicit in the law, but you see in political discourses as well. So what do I mean by that? So in the law, for example, you see explicitly articulated the idea that societal discrimination.
I just want to do a quick pause and explain this. So colorblindness to normal people means that we do not judge people based on the color of their skin. That seems to be the definition that this guy is taking, which really tells me that he does not, he's like a useful idiot, right? He does not understand what the woke left is doing. He's a useful idiot. Might be a perfectly nice guy, but he is using the proper definition of colorblindness. What most of the woke left, up to and including Kimberly flipping Crenshaw, will tell you is that colorblindness means that you don't see someone's skin color. We can see people's skin color. This is why I don't really use this word that much. I use the word color indifference, which is to say that I can see your skin color. I'm just not going to treat you differently based on the color of your skin. Purely for this issue, because I think the term colorblindness is a really easy term to manipulate. But he's using the proper definition, which to me tells me he's nothing more than a useful idiot.
Amorphous a thing for us to do something legally about. Societal discrimination, too amorphous. You heard Kim talk already about Washington versus Davis. Racial disparities, we can't do
Look at Kimberly's
anything
face.
about that.
Look at his.
Show me a bad apple person, then we can talk.
Wow.
If you can't show me that, then just go away. So one way in which colorblindness works is to just say, see no evil, hear no evil. I don't want to see it. A more pernicious way in which it works is to say that efforts to address racial inequality, racial remediation efforts, are presumptively suspect. So the basic idea, and sit up because this should shock you, you weren't shocked enough before, is that the law treats efforts like trying to create majority-minority voting districts. The law sort of thinks about those efforts, or affirmative action. The law thinks about those efforts in the way that it thinks about Jim Crow. You're both using race. You're using race to think about majority-minority districts, using race for Jim Crow. Therefore, we're going to apply the highest standard of scrutiny to figure this stuff out. Why? Because we can't figure out whether this is good or this is bad. We just can't figure it out. I'm not even exaggerating when I say that Supreme Court decision-making reflects the idea that judges lack the capacity to draw a distinction between invidious uses of race and benign uses of race. They just can't do it. They throw their hands up in the air. Therefore, all uses of race must be subject to strict scrutiny. The third thing I want to say about colorblindness, which is crucial, it seems to me, is to go back to Reconstruction. Let's think about the precise context out of which colorblindness emerged. So we'll see the quote in a minute, in which Justice Harlan is dissenting in Plessy versus Ferguson. So you all know Plessy versus Ferguson. That's the case that says segregation is constitutional, all right? So Justice Harlan dissents. He says segregation is not constitutional, it's unconstitutional. And in that context, he articulates the idea that our Constitution is colorblind, all right? And in the context of saying our Constitution is colorblind, Justice Harlan also says, the white race is the dominant race in this country. So I doubt it will continue to be if it holds true to its values, traditions, etc. There's the quote. That's the quote. Now, when you read that quote, you have to remind yourself that Justice Holland is arguing against racial segregation. Do you like that quote? Do you like that quote? This is call and response. Do you like that quote? You do not like that quote because it's a quote that presupposes that you can have a colorblind constitution on the one hand and white dominance on the other. Why aren't we talking about this when colorblindness is being radicalized? So it's not that we're saying that colorblindness is per se bad in every context. It's that we're saying that colorblindness can coexist with forms of racial inequality. And the very context out of which colorblindness emerged teaches us that.
This is
Holland
salad.
is
If you
both
think this is
arguing
word salad, I
against
want to see a
racial
chapel
segregation
of
on the
salad
one hand,
emojis.
and suggesting
He's
that
not saying
why are
anything.
you worried, white people, about integration? We're going to remain the dominant people
This
in
is
this country.
word
Full stop.
salad.
So we need to contextualize this particular point.
This doesn't
as a
mean
way of
anything
understanding
in
that
regards
myth.
to the
All right,
current
so I don't want to
fight
compare
about
Judge
critical race
Harlan
theory.
to the
This
Massachusetts
does not
Association
mean
of School
anything.
Superintendents. But I want to ask you, Kim, to respond to what just happened there. On August 9th, the Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents felt called upon to comment on this critical race theory brouhaha and to state whether or not it teaches critical race theory in public
Which it
schools.
does.
And
100%,
the statement that they
yes,
released
it
said the
does.
simple answer is no.
No,
We do
lies.
not teach CRT. They're familiar.
The Massachusetts School Board Association has no cause to make that comment because the Massachusetts School Board Association has absolutely no say over curriculum in Massachusetts. The only states in which the school boards have say over the curriculum are Vermont and Connecticut. So the Massachusetts School Board Association can make up whatever fairy tale nonsense it flipping wants. They have no say over curriculum. The people who decide what is taught in the state of Massachusetts are the teachers. They're the teachers. And the state of Massachusetts is where we have at least one instance where Boston Latin, which used to be one of the best public high schools in the country, Boston Latin eliminated advanced placement classes. Why? Because they were too white. That action in and of itself proves that critical race theory is alive and well in Massachusetts, which should surprise absolutely no one because Massachusetts is one of the states out there that's like a progressive effing homeland. They're lying. They're either lying because they're ignorant or they're lying purposefully. It doesn't really matter. They are lying. Never, ever, 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 ever believe them when they say that they are not teaching critical race theory in schools. They're always lying. 100% of the time they are lying. We can always find examples of this bullshit going on because the school boards do not dictate curriculum. The teachers dictate the curriculum. For crying out loud.
With it enough to use.
I'm sorry to get stern with you guys. I'm sorry. It's not you. It's them. It's not you.
The acronym, but yeah. And they say that, they don't teach it. What we do teach is the curriculum frameworks for history and social science.
Lies.
Since 1993, that curriculum has required various things. One of the things it requires is an effective history and social science curriculum that teaches the legacy of democratic government.
That's critical race
Another
theory.
thing it teaches, it requires, is an effective history and social.
I'm sorry. What? Hang on. Rewind. Hang on.
Do teach is the curriculum frameworks for history and social science. Since 1993, that curriculum has required various things. One of the things it requires is an effective history and social science curriculum that teaches the legacy of democratic government.
They're teaching holy shit. It is very common for these presentations to attack capitalism. In almost every single presentation that we've ever watched at Happy Hour, there is a direct attack on capitalism. This presentation just attacked democratic forms of government. Now, listen, I'm ambivalent really right now about the forms of democracy. I think democracy is kind of like mob rule. But I'm finding it a little shocking that she just said that we don't teach critical race theory. We teach like the implications of a democratic form of government. I'm just going to listen to this one more time. Just one more time so we can all hear this in action.
Since 1993, that curriculum has required various things. One of the things it requires is an effective history and social science curriculum that teaches the legacy of democratic government. Another
The
thing,
legacy of democratic government, as opposed to what else? What else do you want? Wow. Wow.
thing it teaches, it requires, is an effective history and social science curriculum that incorporates diverse perspectives and acknowledges that perception of events are affected by race, ethnicity, culture, religion, education, gender identity, sexual orientation, disability, and personal experience.
Thank
I
you,
could go on, but
George.
I
I
suspect you
appreciate
might
it.
have
I'll
some
keep
thoughts on
venting
what
and I'll
the
have a
board
pint on
has
you.
done.
Thank
Is that
you.
enough? Sufficient? Game over?
It gives me a flavor. Thanks. I have to say, this is what was tactically really so effective about what the attack on something that nobody knows what it is does, right? It's a little bit like, do you still beat your wife? There is no
Yes, critical race theory
answer
is a
that
little bit like
doesn't
that.
indict you.
Yes, Kimberly,
So
exactly.
for them to say, we don't teach critical race theory, is basically to say that that thing that you guys have framed as being all these terrible things, we don't have anything to do about that. It basically tries to deal with the attack on anti-racist education by saying we don't do that thing that you guys have packed everything having to do with anti-racism into. Now, I have to say, initially, I also said, what's this all about? As far as I know, critical race theory, the course, is not a topic in K through 12 education. But that's not what this attack.
Kimberly Crenshaw, a month before she gave this talk, put on a critical race theory summer school in which there was a whole track called Critical Race Theory in Education. She led that event. It was her event. She is a liar.
Is about, right? Saying, no, I'm not doing that doesn't work when the real attack is on any kind of racial justice oriented education. So you can run from the name. That's not what they're after. They're after the substance of what it is that is being
You
taught.
can run from the name.
So
holy shit, you can run from the name. And this is exactly what they're going to do. And everyone needs to be prepared for this. They're going to change the name to something else. Mark my words. They're going to change the name to something else. They already kind of are. Culturally responsive learning, critical pedagogy, social emotional learning. Social emotional learning is a different thing technically, but some people are starting to use it interchangeably, which I think is a bad idea, but like whatever. Rufo's arguing that we should label everything critical race theory. I think it's a bad idea. I think it and listen, I like Rufo. I really do. He's a really good person. But I think that this is a misstep. I think social emotional learning is a different thing. I don't think we should be naming it the same, but some people are starting to use those terms interchangeably. They're going to name it something else is the point.
We learn anything from other moments like this in which the right has come after something and we thought we could continue doing it by calling it something else, then
she is
that
projecting.
should be enough of
Holy
a
shit.
Cautionary tale. So what else has happened like this? You guys remember Acorn? Okay, same thing.
She's about to attack James O'Keefe's work. Exposing Acorn was the first big thing that James O'Keefe did. He worked with in Breitbart to do it, Andrew Breitbart, back in the day. Breitbart talks about it in his book. That's what she's about to go after is James O'Keefe, Project Veritas, that sort of thing. PG, thank you for the super chat. It's so satisfying to see critical racists on defense. Yeah, they really are. They really are. And that's why we need to keep bringing it and keeping the pressure on. We cannot stop, not for anything. Even if we make a mistake sometimes, we got to keep going. We got to keep pushing through that. Okay? We have to keep pushing through that. Keep the pressure on.
Lies got told about Acorn from the far right.
From James
Mainstream
O'Keefe.
media didn't do anything about it until
From James O'Keefe. That's who told you about Acorn, was James O'Keefe. Before Project Veritas. This was like when James O'Keefe was like a skinny little fucker. He still is pretty skinny, but like he was like a little skinny, tiny little fucker when he did the Acorn stuff.
it became hugely controversial. Then when the mainstream media came in, they didn't come in to report the story as basically being a misinformation campaign against a social justice, racial justice organization. They reported it as a controversy. It's a controversy that most people didn't get involved in. Have you heard of anything about Acorn since? It destroyed Acorn.
Right.
Affirmative action, same thing. Affirmative action is attacked as preferential treatment. Mainstream media comes in, they use the same terms of the attack.
Do you guys remember back last year when the state of California actually tried to eliminate language in its own constitution that expressly forbid discrimination based on race, specifically because they wanted to discriminate based on race? You guys remember that? Just saying. Listen, James O'Keefe, Project Veritas has very deep pockets. They're going to be fine. But what is going on? If you guys are not following what is going on with... Okay, so essentially, side note. Essentially, so we all know, I think we all know, the FBI raided Project Veritas's apartment or offices and actually like the homes of Project Veritas employees. And they took James O'Keefe's phone and they started like sourcing the phone for information. And then the courts told them to stop. And then the FBI, when the courts told them to stop looking through James O'Keefe's phone, the FBI leaked to the New York Times the contents of James O'Keefe's phone. This is blatant and rampant corruption. If you still had any faith in the FBI right now, you need to stop. The FBI needs to be disbanded. I'm sorry. Not sorry at all. They leaked the contents of James O'Keefe's phone to the New York Times. They are specifically engaging in a partisan political witch hunt. If the GOP doesn't hold hearings on this, the GOP needs to be completely fucking abandoned if they do not hold hearings on this. I'm sorry. I understand the argument that, like, the GOP is better than the Democrats. Not if they can't do the bare minimum. If the GOP does not hold hearings based on this, F the GOP. Sorry. And we all know they're probably going to gain control in 2022, so don't tell me, like, they can't do it right now, Carl, and they don't have power. Listen, man, you watch how the GOP handles this, how they're not saying anything, to the best of my knowledge. Maybe I could. Yeah, I hear Tim Pool did a really great rant on it. This is some bullshit right here. Anyway, side note, let's get back.
Rather than asking, well, what actually is affirmative action? What actually does it do? What are the contexts in which it's useful? So the same thing has happened in the past to important social justice concepts. The point being, we cannot simply run from the names of the ideas when what they are after is the work that the ideas actually do. If you actually look at the legislation, it's legislation. Most of it doesn't even name critical race theory, by the way. It basically says divisive concepts cannot be taught.
No.
It says concept.
No, it doesn't say that. It specifically enumerates the divisive concepts that you can't teach because we know that you're going to name critical race theory something else. So it doesn't say you can't teach critical race theory because what will you do? You'll just name it something else. So what it specifically lists are the divisive concepts that you can't teach. That's what most of the legislation does.
Concepts that make individuals feel a certain way. Feel discomfort.
No,
right?
She's lying.
Feel shame.
Lies.
Cannot be
Lies.
taught. It is a concept that suggests that the feelings of being presented with material from the past are more important than the realities that are created from racial injustice in the past. What is a better case of fragility than the idea that how you feel about something is going to determine whether we learn about what it has actually done?
Oh, really, Kimberly? Oh, really? So you're then going to label the entire woke left and anyone who has ever supported you as fragile because they operate on feelings based on all day, every goddamn day. Are we, if Kimberly, if you would like to eliminate all feelings from the conversation, I think you would have a lot of allies here.
That's the world we're living in right now.
And one form that that's taking, that, you know, just to make it super concrete, in Tennessee, they have now banned distributing Ruby Bridges' biography to school students because they said it makes the white students so...
That is not true. That was stupid. That shouldn't have been done. This is an example, and I did a video about this, and again, conservatives didn't like it. They were like, why are you infighting? This shouldn't have been done. Like, touching that Ruby Bridges thing shouldn't have been done. Sorry, we shouldn't be banning books. That is not part of this. It shouldn't be part of it anyway.
Uncomfortable to see the pictures of the angry white people.
No. It's not what happened.
Ta-Nehisi Coates. Brian
This is why we
Stevenson.
don't do
These
this
are all
crap.
texts that are now
Well,
being
Ta-Nehisi Coates
ejected
is a...
out of libraries. I want to ask you, Kim, to play a video. We're going to play
another
a video
video
that your organization produced, and afterwards we're going to talk about why we're playing this video. To address this question, I think we're coming back to this question of what could be the real consequences, what are the real consequences, and what the heck do we do? Okay, so
ooh, another
the
video.
equal opportunity running track, racetrack video.
Let's get ready, guys. Another video. We're good. Oh my God. Wow. What the fuck? What the hell is this? Wow. Why would the other competitor be stopping to help her? Why would they be stopping to help each other? They're competitors. Oh my God. Wow. little bit of misogyny in there too. My headphones were literally buzzing. Okay. I can't even address this seriously. That's not real life. This is like the perfect example of how these people just make shit up that has no basis in reality at all. You could have actually, like, there was a very small sliver of a chance that these people actually could have gotten me with an argument for systemic racism if they argued that the main foundations of society were built back when things were a whole heck of a lot more racist, and then we continued to build things on top of them, build things on top of them, build things on top of them that led to fundamental disparities. I could have actually gotten on board with this argument. I could have. Until cartoons like this that go so far off the rails of any semblance that has anything to do with reality at all. That's not real. They have no data to back up how they characterized racism in that cartoon. This was made up to say, let's do the worst, most inflammatory thing that we could possibly do to make all the liberal woke white people really mad. And then we have this liberal white lady with her JCPenney pantsuit going, yes, yes, stunning and brave, stunning and brave. That's what's going on. That's it.
That video did some work. It also ruffled some feathers.
It did. It did. So
I wonder
created
why.
This video in the middle of the affirmative action wars. Many of you know that the attack on affirmative action moved from the constitutional courts then to state bans on affirmative action. And one of the constant challenges was the way affirmative action was framed. It was often framed as it's a battle over reverse discrimination or a battle over preferential treatment. Even people who were supporting affirmative action fell into using that framing. And our goal was to help people understand that removing obstacles to fair and equitable access is not preferential treatment. It's preferential treatment when you allow them to stay there.
Equitable is not the same
It's
as
preferential
equality.
treatment for the people who don't have those obstacles on their pathways compared to those who do. So our goal was to try to just find a very simple,
Listen,
easy
man.
way.
Listen, everyone has different obstacles in life. Everyone is born in different places. Some people are born in more advantageous places than other people. And that's just the way it is. That's just the way it goes. That does not mean you give advantages to a certain segment of society who may not have all been born in a disadvantageous position. I'm sorry, I'm just going to say it. Not all Black people are born in a disadvantageous position. That's not true. Not all white people are born in an advantageous position. It's not true. So, like, this whole idea, and what she's arguing for isn't even equality, and we need to be really clear about that. What these people are not arguing for equality. They're not arguing to make the most number of opportunities available to the most number of people. They're arguing for equity, which is completely different. It's about equality of outcome, which means what she's saying is that people who look like me should be given special advantages and special privileges regardless of the advantages that they were born with, which they may have been born with. Kimberly Crenshaw is not a poor, abused person. Kimberly Crenshaw is rich as F. She is rich AF. Makes a lot of money selling this to guilty white people. Savrik's placebo racism, placebo mask wearing, placebo identities, projecting them into the world and onto others and believing it to be real when it isn't real. This is not real. Everything in that cartoon was not real.
Of showing the intergenerational dimensions of exclusion, white supremacy, how wealth accumulates over generations, how obstacles make it that much harder to play, how catch up is not even possible without direct policies that take into account this histories and these obstacles. So we created this video. It was useful. Millions of people watched it. It was used in training and equity and various other places. Well, one high school decided to use it when there had been a flare-up around racial tensions in the high school, use of the N-word over the public address system, and they decided to have a day in which students would talk about race and racism. So the faculty used this video to begin the conversation. One grandparent decided that the video itself was racist, and took it to Fox News. It then became a cause on Fox News. A school board meeting was held in which the school board apologized for allowing this video to be shown. Now, this happened about 10 years ago. It was in Rico County. Some of you may know that it is the home of Richmond, which is the home of the Confederacy. The idea that showing a video about the historical dimensions of white supremacy would be framed as reverse racist and a guilt video was just outrageous. And we thought, all right, you just got to chalk it up to that particular school board. Little did we know that that was the beginning of an idea that a direct confrontation with history and its contemporary consequences would be framed as a guilt video. That's what happened there. It also happened in Arizona with the Chicano Studies program, in which students who went through that program did extraordinarily well, increasing in test scores. And
Savris also says, all data we consume from our individual experiences and external observation of others is the information that our boundaries of perception is formed. That is exactly right. Well done.
The college matriculation, the state of Arizona made it illegal and threatened to withdraw educational resources from schools that use the program. So this is not about educational excellence. It's not about education at all. It's about whether a story can be tolerated that makes it clear that there are advantages and disadvantages from the past that continue to be built into our system. And so this is an attack on even being able to say that there is structural inequality, to say that the past still shapes this immediate future. That was the beginning. We should have anticipated that it would grow. It has, and now it's the juggernaut that we're facing right now.
Sean H. says, grifters like Crenshaw don't understand how to produce things of value, how to expand economic wealth and opportunity, can only complain about stuff. And you know what? It wouldn't be so bad if it was just her, but she is teaching an entire generation of people that if you want success in the world, all you need to do is complain. You don't need to actually do stuff. You don't need to build stuff. You don't need to give value to the world. You don't need to help people. You don't need to serve people. You don't need to do any of these things. You just need to complain. And that's all it is.
Anything you want to add to that, Devin? One aspect of this moment that is different from when that was made is the power of right-wing echo chambers, the comparative lack of engagement of even the so-called liberal media or their familiarity with any of what we're talking about. And also, you know, speaking
this
as a
woman
white
is
person,
so smug.
The flip
This
side
bitch
of what
is
you
so
talked about,
smug.
the killability
My
of African
God.
Americans is the perceived unkillability, an actual unkillability of white people as
I want to debate this woman. I don't even care about Kimberly Crenshaw and that other dude. I want this woman right here. I'm going to invite this woman on my channel. I want to debate her. Smug bitch. My God. I don't usually use that word about women, but if there was ever a woman to use, look at her face. Come on. JCPenney's pantsuits, for Christ's sake.
demonstrated on January 6th. So to me, this feels like a super dangerous moment, and yet one that many of us are nonetheless trapped in our silos, in our algorithmically designed bubbles, such that when you wrote to me about the first time the attack on critical race theory had been uttered by President Trump.
Oh, we're going to talk about Trump now. Oh, good. Colorblindness equals pure-hearted love of all people. Yeah, I don't think we should be using the word colorblindness. It's too easy to manipulate. You are handing the left a win every time you use the term colorblindness because they can manipulate it like that. It's not even hard. It's like, boom. It's like they sniff it out. We have to be playing smart here. I heard about 4D chess all last year. Play fucking 4D chess. Color and difference. I see the color of your skin, but I'm not going to treat you differently based on it.
I hadn't seen it. It hadn't come to my
she's never gonna
feed
come
in a
on my
way
channel,
that got
please.
my attention. And I host a television show. I read and subscribe to a million things. So talk, if you could, Deb, and maybe kick off the conversation about the critical importance and fragility of this moment, and whether you see examples of effective comeback. Because as Kim said earlier, part of the problem with these kinds of attacks is the attack itself does the work. And by the time you respond, you're just adding fuel to the fire.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's particularly important to begin where Kim began, which is to say, for far too long, people on the left / liberal side of the aisle, if you like, have misunderstood what the contestation over affirmative action has been about. In other words, the fight about affirmative action was never just about affirmative action, though it was about that, to be sure. The fight about affirmative action was about all forms of racial mediation, and it's relevant to the particular moment in the following sense. So the Supreme Court, what the Supreme Court did to affirmative action is what conservatives are now doing with CRT. Here's what I mean. So what the Supreme Court did with affirmative action is to tell a narrative about the degree to which this is damaging white people, is discriminating against white people, and is conferring a bunch of benefits to particularly Black people. That idea didn't stay with affirmative action. That idea then carried over, metastasized, so that it would limit voting rights, and I can map the case, so that it would limit racial mediation in employment context, so that it would limit voluntary integration, so they have a fight over here, and then they export it over there. They're having a fight about CRT, but it's about diversity training, it's about civic education, it's about corporate diversity, it's about the very possibility of invoking an anti-racist sensibility.
Well, yes,
And
it is about
we
that.
miss the
Because we
terrain
reject the idea.
if we think that it is about quote unquote critical race theory per se, in the same way that we missed the terrain when we understood it to just be about affirmative action. And I think if nothing else, leave this moment understanding that there's a fight over the baseline. The dominant way for thinking about the way things are, Black people experience slavery, Black people experience Jim Crow, Black people are over-incarcerated. Your assumption should be that there's some relationship between the history of slavery, the history of Jim Crow, the underrepresentation of Black people, the underemployment of Black people, the over-incarceration of Black people. If that's not your assumption, then you are saying there's something wrong with us, okay? And so you've got to think about how that narrative further constructs a story about Black subalternity. That's what's particularly dangerous about this moment, it seems to me, is that there isn't enough of an interrogation of the way things are. The way things are rooted in historical practices, historical laws, in ways that we insufficiently take account of. And the absence of that historical understanding limits our possibility to move forward, particularly against the backdrop of the kind of broad structures that exist for disseminating these distortions.
But our democracy story tends to be told over here when our affirmative action, critical race theory, racism story gets told over here. Is that shifting? Kim?
Kim can speak to that more robustly from I, but because of the and you should tell the stories about trying to engage in disrupting that dichotomy, the kind of pushback that you get.
Yeah. Well, so I know we come to a point in this conversation in which the question is what to do. And some part of what we're queuing up here is a lot of the work is creating the connections between all the things that we're seeing. So earlier the question was, what's the relationship between the attack on voting, the attack on protest, and the attack on critical race theory? Turns out it's really the same people doing the same thing. If you look at the states that are attacking voting, they overlap with the states that are attacking critical race theory, which overlaps with the states that are trying to criminalize protest. What is it they're trying to do? They're trying to eliminate our political power, our ability to choose. They're trying to eliminate our ability to complain about our inability to choose. And they're trying to eliminate our ability to speak it. And to speak it historically.
Dude.
This is what has happened.
No one is trying to eliminate your ability to speak anything, Kimberly. You have a massive platform. You can say whatever the F you want. What we are trying to eliminate your ability to do is to indoctrinate children in government-funded schools. That is it. If those children want to grow up and make the choice to go to college and make the choice to take your classes and make the choice to be indoctrinated into your insane ideology, fine. I don't agree with it, but fine. But if those children are indoctrinated when they are too young to have any basic defenses, you want to teach them what to think, not how to think. And a lot of us have a very big problem with that, and I ain't a conservative.
Happened before. The attack on learning has always been a response to Black people mobilization. The attack on our ability to testify in court against white people. If you can't speak, of course you're subject to be injured. That was once a part of law. We're moving in that direction with respect to not being able to speak historically about the situation we're in. So you might ask, where are the allies? Where does the rescue kind of come from, right? I want to tell you they're right over the hill. I want to be able to say that. In reality, I have to say they're still trying to figure out whether this particular issue is important enough for them to get involved in. They're still trying to figure out. I mean, y'all know this. There should be no question that we need a Voting Rights Act right now. That should not even be contested. And yet, those who depend most on our votes are kind of sitting it out, taking a wait and see kind of approach. They're going to see pretty soon that we cannot out-organize an intention to repress us. And so they've got to stand up right now. The same instinct behind trying to push us out is the same instinct behind trying to silence us. So part of what we're trying to do is make sure that the pro-democracy people understand there is no daylight between racial justice and a multiracial democracy. These are not separate issues. When those people showed up.
So what they're talking about now is that they are basically going to frame everything the GOP tries to do in terms of election integrity as racist. That's what she's saying. They're being very plain about it. They will try to frame everything the GOP tries to do in terms of election integrity as racist.
On January 6th with the Confederate flag, that wasn't an accident. When they say you're taking away our country.
There was like one Confederate flag on January 6th. I'm sorry. They found the one singular Confederate flag on January 6th and they have put it everywhere. I was at January 6th. I was walking around in the crowd for hours and hours and hours. Just talking to normal people because that's how I like to roll with these things. I was there. There was like 1, maybe 2 at the most Confederate flags out of 1 million effing people. But of course, that's the one they choose. And yes, Abe Buchanan, you're absolutely right. They're losing the narrative and they know it, and that's why they have to lie. 1 million American flags on January 6th, whole bunch of Trump flags flying around. There were like 1 or 2 Confederate flags from, probably people who were plants, quite frankly. And that's all they focus on, of course.
They mean that. They think that this is their country. So for them,
It is
it's
their
not even
country.
really about fraud. It's about the fact that these hands chose the president. It's about the fact that this country isn't recognizable to them anymore. It's about the fact that they have been bred on an idea that this country belongs to people that look a certain way and not to all of us. So that's the challenge now, to bring pro-democracy into a conversation about racial justice into a conversation about pro-democracy, both of those into a conversation about how our media are not serving us well. All of these things have to be at the top of our agenda if we're going to be able to pass that baton on to the next generation. I'm committed to doing that. I know our ancestors worked tirelessly to be able to pass this baton to us, and I am not going to allow this to preclude what we can pass on to the next generation.
Then
so we've got to get together, to do the work necessary.
Then literally all you need to do is go to the DMV and get a goddamn driver's license or an ID. That's all you need to do. Literally all you need to do. Why is it that like you have no faith in Black people to go to the effing DMV and get a driver's license or a photo ID? It's not that hard. That's literally all they have to do, Kimberly. That's it. That's it. Very low bar. That's it. Why don't you think they can do that?
Necessary to fight back against this effort to repress our very ability to imagine what a multiracial democracy has to look like.
So we have about 10 minutes for questions, more answers. While you're thinking of some, I will just suggest that this is a great time to get your organizing shoes on. The school semester is beginning. If you happen to live in Tennessee, your public school system, and let's remember that public school budgets are also under attack here, is going to be penalized between $1 and $5 million for every infraction of the ban on critical race theory. In Wisconsin, 10% of the public school budget will be cut for any district that receives over a certain number of parental complaints.
Good.
And we know who's organizing those parental complaints. And they are the same people with the same talking points that you'll see talking about fraud.
They are literally just upset that we're actually organizing and we're actually like coordinating. And frankly, to be quite frank, like the coordinating among different groups kind of sucks. Like this is haphazard organizing at best. Let's just be very honest. But they're upset that they have been organizing for decades. They have been pushing this crap for decades. And now the right is finally starting to get their shit together, and they're doing it haphazardly, and it's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, and there are different talking points being used, and there's a lot more coordination that I would like to see brought to this movement, and I'm working on that, I promise you. But they are upset that the right is doing anything. They are so used to the right doing absolutely nothing that they cannot handle it when the right starts to actually take an active role and participate. They've been doing this for decades. That's what this is. They are annoyed that people who disagree with them are starting to crash their little parties.
Fraud and the big lie. So we have an opportunity to engage where we are, be it a boardroom or a school board or just as a parent. I don't mean just as a parent. Don't forget, Moms for the Republic. Anybody got questions? Right here, and then right back there. So let's take those two first.
Hi, my name is Mia Hall. I'm a podcast host and content creator of Parables from the Projects podcast. I wanted to ask, like, as a creator, how can we not, or I don't know if it's embody, critical race. I mean, like, of course, we do it every day and all the time. If you are talking about stories from the Black community, then you're going to be doing it. But do you have any advice for like people that are creating movies, films, TV shows? Like, how can they help, like, with that fight, or any advice on what not to do? You know what I mean? Like, that's all I'm asking.
Do you want to answer that while Mark is running to the back? Who was the question in the back?
Oh,
Right there. Okay, so do you want to respond?
yeah, and I'm sure Devin has some. So I think continuing to basically create content that, I don't know, is simple, tells the truth. There's so much pressure.
Oh, we'll
and
create
one of
content that
things
tells the truth,
I'm really
Kimberly.
worried about is that if
Happy to
people see this
oblige.
as just being
Cheers.
about K through 12, they're not seeing the handwriting on the wall. So this is having an impact and will have an impact in DEI, in the corporate sector.
Thank
Many
God.
of our brothers and sisters have jobs in that sector. If this gets attacked, then the resources that are made available for advertising, for content creation that's specific to our communities, that will also evaporate. So being clear that this will have impact on creatives eventually, I think is enough to begin the organizing against it before it actually happens. The last thing I want to recommend, we did a panel at the Sundance Institute called The Story of Us with Brian Stevenson and David Blight and Viet Thanh Nguyen, which dealt with the fact that what we saw in January 6th is not simply a product of politics, it's a product of storytelling. It's a product of a long history of Hollywood telling a story about the exclusive rights of white people to this republic.
Yes,
And us as
Hollywood is
basically
the
being
bastion
an
of
afterthought.
conservatism.
Birth of a
Yes.
Nation is still seen as one of
Yes.
the best movies ever made.
No, it's not.
And that is the story of the lost cause. That's the story of our
Wow.
degradation as a people. It's a story that Reconstruction was a mistake. More people saw that movie than see the truth about Reconstruction. So when you know that this is the bread and butter that creatives have actually participated in creating,
Hollywood is conservative,
then
guys.
what we saw on
Congratulations.
January 6th is as much about what goes on in Hollywood as what goes on in the White House.
Holy
That
shit.
has to be a commitment that we make to tell the story of us through these initiatives. That
You guys know, like, I have friends that are actors in Hollywood, like, legit, and like they don't, like, they're not like, I don't have a friend that's like a full-on like hitting conservative in Hollywood, but I definitely have friends that are like, they do not agree with this woke shit at all. But they can't say anything, because if they say anything, they will never get another job again. Dave Rubin talks about this all the time. Dave Rubin knows of so many hitting conservatives in Hollywood that are so afraid to actually say they're conservative, because he's friends with all of them and they like drink together and stuff. Like, this is the very idea that Hollywood is a conservative bastion is the most ridiculous thing I've heard in this entire presentation. I'm sorry, whatever.
that we all are expecting to see in Hollywood. So I highly recommend it. It's called The Story of Us, and you can find it on our website.
Question back there to you, Devin, I think.
Yes, this was a very enlightening discussion, so thank you very
No,
much.
it wasn't. Come on.
One of the things that I kind of struggle with is that it seems to me that even our most liberal white allies who believe very fundamentally in a multicultural democracy also benefit from white privilege, white power. And people tend to not give up benefit and advantage voluntarily, easily. And I think people also struggle to really recognize in a real, authentic way the reality of their privilege. And I'd be interested in just kind of hearing your thoughts on that intersection and how it impacts being able to work through all of this? Sorry for the long-winded question.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the point of departure for much of the work we do is, in fact, getting people to understand how they exist in relationship to structures. So to the extent that one doesn't have an understanding of the dynamics that we just described, the extent to which everything that's on the table now vis-a-vis CRT and its attack, and what that means with respect to social policy shifts has been on the table before, they're not going to be in a good position to think about what their advocacy vis-a-vis some of these broader structural problems might be. So I do think that part of the issue is, to use a slightly academic term, a kind of epistemological one, an understanding that people don't necessarily see the way structures might be working across disparate domains. And true, there's always an issue about thinking through what your own individual relationship to the thing is. I get that. But to be perfectly honest, I would be happy if tomorrow people went out there and started making arguments for particular kinds of social policy, for particular kinds of laws, for particular kinds of interventions that are outside of the dominant frames of doing work. What that will do to them on the individual tip, I don't presume to know. And that's a second order of business that, I'm not a psychologist, so I don't feel like I can speak competently to that.
I am a
do
psychologist,
think
and I
that,
can speak competently to
people are
that.
making the wrong arguments, are traveling with the wrong understandings. And all of that then is intersecting with the wrong projects in ways that people are not always even mindful of. So I would start with thinking big, thinking structurally, have the right understanding to make the right kind of arguments that pushes back against the various kinds of distortions that we see, and hope that that will do constitutive work with respect to how people self-interrogate.
And I have to, I want
Word
to
salad,
come in
salad,
too as a
salad,
white person
salad,
with white
salad,
privilege.
salad.
If we haven't learned something in this period of COVID about how our individualism kills us collectively, I think we haven't been paying attention. And at a very basic level, as a creator, I think we have been sold a reality or story, a narrative of scarcity.
Well, you know what? I actually agree with her on that. I do think we've been sold a narrative of scarcity, but that is not in conjunction with race. That's in conjunction with everything. Nick H says Ibram X. Kendi accidentally admitted white kids are lying about their own race to get into college, but somehow white people are still in power. Lemmings. Well, you know what? The other thing they did is that, you know what? I saw an article today. I'm going to talk about it probably on my Sunday effed up news broadcast. And the article basically said Kyle Rittenhouse's jury is white and is therefore racist. And, the thing that apparently progressives don't understand is that every single person that Kyle Rittenhouse shot is white. So by the woke definition of racism in terms of white people continuing to lift up other people in power, wouldn't a white jury actually benefit white victims because they don't want to see white victims be shot? It really is true. Like, apparently progressives do not understand in any way that Kyle Rittenhouse's, the people he shot, I will not call them victims, the people he shot were white. Apparently they really don't get it.
That we have got to let go of. If we don't stand with the typical has been for the white person to say, well, I got mine, maybe I won't touch that because that looks scary and the people are going to get hurt who attend to that over there. We, as white people, have got to do the opposite. These two beautiful people are not going to say what waging this fight has cost each of them individually. What it's like to fight that fight your whole frigging life. I have a very long way to go before I get uncomfortable in this work or am made uncomfortable. So at the very base, the very first, I would say, especially to white creators, bring on people that teach critical race theory, talk about critical race theory. Do not abandon people. Do not distance yourself from people.
No.
Do the work. and maybe give up a little space.
Fuck you. No. Give up
Kim
your TV
was
show.
kind of keen on us calling
Give
it quits,
up-
but I absolutely
Give up your TV show. You said you were a TV show host. When are you going to give up your TV show to a black creator? You can go fuck yourself, lady. I'm not giving up shit. Please.
we should not have the last word here. So maybe one last question. Here.
Hi, I feel fortunate that I'm from Virginia, which just passed legislation adding African American history and social studies to.
I bet she doesn't feel like she's fortunate to come from Virginia anymore. I bet she doesn't feel that way at all anymore. Remember, this was back in August. It is a whole new world in Virginia because of the parents in Virginia.
To the state's curriculum and standards of learning, which for Virginia is incredible. I am the education committee chair for the our local Arlington NAACP chapter, and we do a lot of work with K through 12. So my question is, and you touched on it briefly, Professor Crenshaw, how much time do we, from a strategic standpoint, how much do we spend fact-checking what CRT isn't and whether it's being taught in schools versus defending CRT as great and not harmful, and why it will understanding it will generate better citizens. I kind of feel like we're back in that place where when President Obama was running for office, we spent too much time defending that he's not a Muslim, he's a Christian, rather than, so what if he's Muslim?
Right, right.
So thank you.
So I thank you, and I will take that and use it, as an opportunity to talk about what I hope we are prepared to do. So I think that when we're caught in a is it CRT or not CRT, they win. That's the whole point of throwing this in. And I have to say, it took a lot of folks a while to figure that out. When this first started, I talked to a lot of people, diversity inclusion, people who were in K through 12, people who were teaching 16, 19, and to almost a person, they all thought, well, it really doesn't implicate me because I don't really teach that. And it's only at this moment where I think it's clear that it doesn't matter what it is you call what you do. If you're trying to center anti-racism in whatever you do, they're coming for you. They've built this cage and they've put us all in it, right? I'm trying to figure out how to turn those lemons into lemonade. And the way I think we do it is to say, what is it that we all have in common? And what we all have in common is we understand history lives among us. We understand that not to be able to say what it is a further injury. We understand that our children, if they're not given the true story about our history, then the only thing left for them to infer looking around the social terrain is there's something wrong with us, right? So my hope is that victories like yours are enough to sustain the fact that what also is happening in Virginia is they're trying to figure out if this is going to be the wedge issue that allows them to regain the House and regain the White House. So if that gubernatorial race comes down to, oh, well, he lost on critical race theory, we can best bet that we're going to see them roll this out more and more and
yes,
more.
You can,
so
Kimberly.
What does it
yes, you can,
require?
honey.
I think
yes.
It requires to imagine what an affirmative education looks like. What it is to educate our students to participate in democracy. What it means when Brown said that education is the key to democratic participation. We've got to go back to just square one and remember public education is a public good to create citizens who can participate in this society. It's not about trying to create an official narrative, an official story about who we are and why we all have to salute to, moments and people of our past. So I think that if we can turn around the corner and talk about what it is that all our children need to know, what it is that empowers them, what it is that tells the truth, what are the truths that have to be celebrated along with the things that everybody wants to celebrate, like July the 4th, right? You can't have the one without the other. So I think affirmative is what we need. And I think tactically, we need to mobilize our parents as much as the other side is mobilizing their parents. We can't have these school boards in which these parents come in and intimidate the school board members and they don't hear anything from us. We've got stories to tell about what's happening to our kids in the classroom. We've got stories to tell about what happened when we learned something about our history that we had not known before. We have moments of epiphany when teachers took us under their wings and told us the truth about our situation in the society. So we need to tell those stories about the negative things that are happening. We need to tell the stories about the positive things that are happening. So I want to encourage us to do that. I want to say, AAPF has, truth be told, is the frame of the work that we're doing. We're asking people, give us these stories. Give us the stories of your transformative moments as a teacher or as a student. Give us a story about what happens when certain things aren't talked about in the classroom. Let us arm ourselves with both the positives that can happen with a dedicated educational process and what happens when we don't do that. And the last thing I'll say is just this, and I feel it deeply. I often wonder what it was like to be African American in like 1870, when we were on an upward trajectory. We had
I'm going to say if Kimberly Crenshaw had actually lived in 1870, she would probably have a whole hell of a lot more appreciation for what's going on right now and all the progress that we made. And no one's going to say it's perfect. I don't think people would. Well, I'm not going to say it's perfect. But I think that Kimberly Crenshaw would have a lot more appreciation for what she has right now if she had actually been alive in 1870.
Senator, we had members of the House of Representatives. We were building schools. We had jobs in federal government. We were gaining property. We had political power. And then all of a sudden, it disappeared.
The Democrats made it disappear, Kimberly. The Democrats.
Decades, we lost pretty much all of that. We didn't get to a point where we came close to what we had until the late 20th century. If we had known then what we know now, what would we have done? Would we have fought harder? Would we have made more connections? Would we insist that our elected officials represented us better? Would we have come together in every way possible to fight that retrenchment? I want to think that with the benefit of history that we do not want to repeat, that we'll learn from this past moment and come together in a way that we've never come together before. And so with that, I want to thank you all for spending this evening.
All right, guys. Well, that looks like it's all she wrote. What did you think of today's presentation with Kimberly Crenshaw, who obviously understands more than she wants to let on about what our real argument is, but is not going to acknowledge any of it? Listen, I would just like one time, just once, that we could actually have a legitimate conversation about critical race theory in which the left wasn't lying about every little thing, that they could acknowledge that it is probably flawed to teach people that they're racist from the time they're 3 years old. Like, if we could come to some basic level of agreement on like the big things, I might be more inclined to let some of this stuff pass. But guys, I hope you enjoyed Happy Hour today. We do this every Friday at 3 p.m. except for next Friday, because next Friday I will be in England. I will be in London, and I will have just gotten off a flight at 7 a.m. London time, which is like 2 a.m. this time. And so I'm going to anticipate that probably around 3 p.m. Eastern time, I'm going to be taking a nap. of some sort, or I'm still going to be groggy, or if I have taken a nap and have recovered, I'm going to be going and having fun in London. So I'm sorry, we will not be doing happy hour next week, but that doesn't mean I won't be streaming and providing content. I will just be doing it in a slightly different way because, I'm going to be in London for a week, man. I'm coming back on Thanksgiving Day. And if you want to take advantage, please make sure you join my locals. I will be doing exclusive live streams for my locals while I am in London. You can join for free at kb.locals.com. It's in the ticker. But if you want to help support the work I do, please make sure you become a supporting member. You can do that by becoming a member at $5 a month, less than a cup of coffee at Starbucks. You could also do it at $50 a year, which gives you 2 months for free. You could give once as just a one-time gift if that's what you want. But please become a member of my locals. Even if you just join for free, you're still going to get access to the exclusive live streams, stuff like that. If you happen to be in London, I will be doing a meetup on November 21st around 3 p.m. London time at a bar near my hotel. So the information for that is in my locals. If you're not available at that time, just let me know, because I actually have someone else in London that's like, Carlin, I really want to meet up with you, but I'm going to be in Paris that weekend. And so I might be doing like a second like covert meetup. But the best place, again, to make sure you're in my locals for that, because that's where I'm going to be talking about it. Please make sure, according to Alexandra Martin, that you have mounted that like button on whatever platform you happen to be watching on. And if you feel so inclined, please make sure you pre-order my book, Actively Unwoke, the ultimate fight guide for fighting back against the woke insanity in your life. It is currently available on Amazon. If you're waiting for the digital copy, that will be coming. I am told it's just not available yet for reasons past my understanding, but whatever. But the hardcover is available right now for pre-order on Amazon and some other places as well. So please make sure you pre-order that. I really appreciate it. It's going to be coming out next year. I'm really looking forward to doing some streams from London in my locals community. I'm going to be like there for like, I'm going to be like doing research to investigate different forms of inspiration that I can use to create art to fight back against the woke. That's the whole purpose of the trip. It's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to it. I will be posting updates in my locals community, guys, so please make sure you join. If you don't, have a great rest of your weekend. I am off to watch V for Vendetta on the big screen with the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire. I'm going to have a great time there. Take care, guys. Have a good one. We'll see you soon.